Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the State of the Open Home 2022. Today we got a super big program with a lot of different speakers, a lot of different projects. And so we're going to kick it right off. We're doing a different setup as the previous years, where in the previous years we had individual presentations. This time we're going to have more group conversations. And we're doing this because, well, we saw the opportunity to get together, and so, we had to take it. So let me just start by showing the slides. So if you can see, we have two different parts today. The first part, intro, is what you're listening to right now. Afterwards, we're going to talk about the open home. Why are we doing this? What's our goal? We're going to show the year in numbers. They've been very impressive. We're going to talk about Home Assistant Cloud and Nabu Casa, how we position ourselves, how the open home positions itself in the market. We, of course, are going to talk about the new smart home standard Matter, and if it matters for you. We're going to talk about the hardware that has been powering Home Assistant in the open home. At the end of part one, we're going to have a great musical performance performed live here in the studio, so that's going to be awesome. Then after the break, you're going to hear from a couple of other people. We're going to talk about how Home Assistant has been improving, how we've been streamlining experiences. We're going to give you a sneak peek how we're doing UX, user experience within Home Assistant, and a sneak peek of what is to come. So we're actually going to walk you through one of the prototypes that we've been playing with. We're going to have then, not everybody's actually local here. We're going to have 3 remote guests today. Our first guest is going to talk about accessibility. Steve will be calling in from the United States. Afterwards, I'm going to talk with Jesse Hills, who leads the ESPHome project. He's going to be calling in from New Zealand. And in the end, we're going to talk to Mike from Raspberry, also calling in from the United States. So, yeah, it's going to be a great show, and I hope you all are going to enjoy it. Awesome. So, I'm joined here today by
Oscar Wissely. I'm the co-founder of Nabu Casa.
Marcel van der Veld. I joined Nabu Casa to work on the new Matter standard.
Cool. So today we want to talk about first is what is the open home, right? Because if you remember last year we kind of defined the open home, and for us it's about 3 things: privacy, choice, and durability. What that means with privacy, it means that your data has to be local. Your data has to stay private. It is okay for a product to be linked to, for example, a cloud, but it has to be opt-in. It shouldn't be the default. With choice, it means that whenever you buy a product, it shouldn't vendor lock you into only buying that product moving on. Your smart home should be able to work with anything and everything. And that usually means that your data has to stay local and has to be locally accessible. And the third thing, and this is a very important one for us, is durability. It's so important that the stuff you buy today keeps working. Not just for 1 year, 5 years, maybe 10 years, right? You need to have thermostats in your house that can discolor, for example. That was the example we gave last year. And there's just so much hardware we buy today. If the cloud goes out, it goes poof, it's gone.
Yeah, there was enough example this year with cloud or manufacturers which just shut down their cloud and then just had a lot of electro trash to throw away.
Right. And that's the sad part is that often you cannot reuse it, right? No. They're not opening it up. So
you lose your money on it, your investigation.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes it's behind the wall. It's really hard. You have to open the wall maybe, or using an electric installer, and that costs a lot of money.
Right. Yeah, and we see actually that a lot of times, sometimes people that are hacking around, they come around, they will be able to go around firmware and hack into it, but it's not accessible for everybody, right?
You have to solder
or
flash firmware.
Yeah. If you really have to open a case, even that is already too much, right? Products just have to be built to be inclusive and be able to include in everything. But for us, the open home is not just words and a value and a mission. The main thing that we do is building, and we don't just do that here in this room. We're actually fully remote. And what our goal is to make sure that what we build is that the smart home that we envision, privacy, choice, durability, is accessible for everybody in an easy way. So, of course, you can buy smart home products today, voice assistants, and these kind of things. But a lot of these things, they rely on the cloud. So what we're building is to make sure that you can have a choice to not rely on that. And it's going very well. So we look at some numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So I think this is the first number we want to show, is that the state of the Octoverse is a yearly thing that GitHub announces, and it is about how's open source doing. And GitHub is a place where actually most of the open source development works. And well, this was pretty cool. 13,500 contributors.
That's amazing. I mean, what's the place 1, 2, 3?
So we're number 2.
Number 2.
Yeah. The number 1, Visual Studio Code, they are way ahead, 20,000. So, well, maybe next year.
Yeah. I mean, it's
them,
Right.
only possible because we have so many contributions from people that work on a free time.
Right. Really?
And
Yeah. And this is not only developers, right? So people that contribute to Home Assistant are contributing documentation. Right. Some are doing code, some are doing issues, they're reporting issues. Like we have a very active beta community that every time that we launch new beta every month, they all install it, they all test it out, they all report all those issues.
But it's also important we try to make a good atmosphere to contribute. So we are really friendly. We have really strict rules to be fair to all other, and we also look that the voice and all is fine and not
Right.
strong like in other projects.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
helps a lot, also for first-time contributors.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually, we don't show it on the slide, but we were actually the number 1 project with the most first contributors on all of GitHub. I think we had 2,600 people that did their first contribution to GitHub.
Yeah.
So, and I think, it is a lot. I think what also helps is that we do a lot of automation and help around it. Like we try to make it easy, right, to help out. Because in the end, people want to help out because this is what they run at home.
I guess it's also GitHub lowered the barriers for first-time contributors. The user interface is getting easier, and that's all things which help.
Oh, for sure.
It's improve your own home, right? So
Yeah.
contribute to your Home Assistant to improve your own home automation. It's really great.
Yeah, definitely. Want to look at some other numbers?
Yeah. Our analytics, right?
Yeah, 1 second. This slide is not.
I mean, that's all live. Oh,
Yeah.
It's actually a joke in there somewhere.
and really good tested,
Yeah.
right?
You can continue talking.
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
gonna
So we have
set up.
over 190,000 connected instances, and that's amazing because it's opt-in, so people have to can enable it and share the numbers with us. And
Maybe the number is even higher, right?
right. Yeah,
People
I guess
that-
3 times or even more.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
And it's really important to have these numbers because we use it to show to manufacturers and give us a voice. So they know we have this user base and we have pressure to say, hey, that's a bug, or can you help us?
Yeah.
Well, and actually about these numbers, right? These are opt-in analytics. So anyone that installs Home Assistant, we ask them, hey, do you want to enable analytics? And so it starts like May 2021, last year. That's when we introduced it. And all the existing users before that, they had to manually find this button. So our estimate is around 3 times as many active instances actually as we see here. So that would mean around 600,000 active Home Assistant installations.
Yeah. And the data are anonymous, so they get anonymized and reported.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see in this graph, I think the graph is on the screen, you can see there's different colors.
Right.
But the top color is all the different installations available, and there's different installation methods. And by far the most popular one is, of course, operating system, because
All in one, right?
it's easy.
Just easy.
Like you don't have to do anything anymore.
Yeah. It's over 68% operating system and over 76% supervised system. That means we doing all the work for the people. So we try to optimize the operating system. We try to optimize everything around the Home Assistant and to run or to make the perfect user experience about that.
Plug and play, right?
Right.
just
So you
like
don't
box.
have to maintain your operating system. You have not to install updates to be care that you have to install the right version of the software.
Well, it's also really empowering us to actually make things even easier, right? Like nowadays you can plug in USB sticks, boom,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, Zigbee, oh, Z-Wave. You know, it just works. Soon Matter, right? It will just be plug and play.
Yeah. But I guess this year we saw also the chip shortage. So our line was a bit short.
Right, I mean,
Flat.
you can actually, this is super interesting because at the slides, if you look at the analytics, you see that nowadays it's kind of climbing again.
Yeah.
And when I look, I always follow, there's this website called rpilocator.com, and it's where people track like official distributors of Raspberry Pi. There are more Pis available now each week, and that's just instantly reflected in our user base. So that is like, there's such a direct link between Raspberry
The
Pi.
Pi is the most popular platform for running home
By
assistant,
far,
right?
by
So
far.
you can see that in the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also really interesting that over 30% use our energy monitor to monitor their energy usage and optimize their energy usage.
I mean,
Or
that
save
is, yeah.
energy, right?
Big deal.
I was at my friend's house last week, and he couldn't do it himself, so I helped him like set up his home assistant, his energy monitoring, and then a week later he came to me. He's like, "Hey, I use like my boiler is always like burning gas, like 0.2 cubic meters of gas a week. He was losing, and he's like, that's not good. That's not good. And like because he saw that insight in like Home Assistant, he was able to. Now he's going to get it addressed.
Yeah, I use too for my heater to have this long-term statistics, and it's really easy to then optimize the heating, and you see directly on the next day is it more or less.
True.
Yeah.
It's really
Use
cool.
it myself too, yeah.
But yeah, people watching are probably wondering, with so many numbers, so many installations, how do you do it, right? Like you don't get the number 2 open source project on GitHub without any requirements or like any organization. So what happened is that 4.5 years ago, basically we got to a point where, as open source maintainer, you do all the chores. And so 4.5 years ago, we got to this point where there are so many chores, it just kind of like, I couldn't combine it with my day-to-day life, my day job. Pascal couldn't combine it, a bunch of others couldn't. So we started Nabu Casa. And with Nabu Casa, we offer Home Assistant Cloud. It's an end-to-end encrypted connection into your local Home Assistant instance. So we don't run Home Assistant for you in the cloud. It is your Home Assistant instance. And this has been great. People are really loving it. What was the data that people tunneled through?
So we routed last year, or this year, as the year is not over, right? It's over 1.5 petabyte data over the internet, just a remote user interface.
Yeah. And we don't know how much, that's the only number we have, right? Because we don't actually know what we're routing because it is end-to-end encrypted.
Yeah, we know just the traffic.
Yeah.
Which we have to pay for it, of course.
Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, it's also over 50,000 webhooks per second, which we route over our
second,
service.
right? Per second.
Yeah.
And so we invested this year to improve our infrastructure, to scale up, and also we're working on a better geolocation setup. So the data are routed near your location. It goes not over the whole world. And it makes also more stable if it's a problem in the USA or it's a problem in Germany, whatever. It's still then go to the next location and it's still running.
These things, we're building on it. I think some of it is already rolled out. You might have noticed already a lot of stability improvements, and it's going to be even faster.
Yeah. But it's important. I mean, it's just an extension. Your data are still local.
True.
So also if it's not work, you have your control over your home because everything is local.
You support the project doing it. So.
Well, I mean, that mainly.
You get convenience and you can support our project.
So because at this point, Nabu Casa, through the support of Home Assistant Cloud, has 20 full-time employees who are just doing all the work on Home Assistant, keeping it running. I mean, we're organizing, of course, events like this today, but going through all the bugs, tag releases, support all the contributors, write release notes, maintain documentation.
And we're still growing. I mean, we are not on the end.
No. So it takes a lot of work to keep the ship going. You don't get number 2 in the world without any effort, but we're managing. Yeah. So.
And it's still everything open source and it's open home. So that's the important part.
And so I thought it'd be also nice to kind of talk today about where we see the position of the open home right now in like the smart home ecosystem. Because we get a lot of times questions are like, oh, are you going to replace Google? Are you going to replace Amazon? And, like I said, of course, we're big. We have a lot of contributors, but you cannot just beat like those big tech companies. So the way we see it is that nobody will start with the open home, because when you start with smart home, you don't really know what you want. So your first piece of software that you get, maybe it will be a Philips Hue kit, you get something at IKEA, you might get a Google Home. You will have to, you kind of learn smart home, and you kind of, at some point, after you learn about smart home, you learn to love smart home, you want more, you start buying more things, until you hit a ceiling. The ceiling is because you buy something that isn't compatible, or you buy something that is, you cannot access the data because you have a certain system without a local API. And those people, they will outgrow, and they will get into our ecosystem. Because once you run into the limitations, I mean, you look for an answer, who can solve it all? It's us, right?
Yeah. And we are global, we are just not focused to one country, and that's also important that we also work on our payment system to have multiple currency.
Right.
And we still work on it. Or we have also to follow all the rules for different countries with sales tax and VAT. It was a lot of work, but I guess it's important to follow all the rules and give the possibility to all people around the world to run an open home.
Yeah.
It's the next step, right? You run out your Google Home and you think, what's next? And what a system that just controls it all. Yeah. And then you simply hit Home Assistant, right?
Yeah.
It's the one answer.
And so one thing that is actually going to help people without growing their first smart home system and get started with Home Assistant is the new smart home standard Matter. And so to talk a bit more about Matter, we have, of course, Marcel, who's our Matter #1 expert. We're also...
Then I leave, I guess, because there is someone better that can explain matters than me. Nice talk.
Yeah.
Hey.
Nice stuff, huh?
So, yeah, I mostly work on operating system, but yeah, this year I started to work on Matter, so that's why I'm here.
So, Matter. We're going to be talking about Matter a lot, I think, next year, because it has been released October 1st this year. And there's a lot of buzz around. I don't know if we have the Matter logo around so we can share it to people. This logo, the Matter logo, you will be seeing a lot next year, because it will be released, there will be products released, and you can watch the box for this logo if it's compatible with Home Assistant. This logo is really good news for us in the local control scene, because before we had to explain to you if a product was going to be easy to use with Home Assistant, if it would be local control, if it would be without a cloud, if there were no subscription involved. And you actually need to dive into our detail pages, look up the manufacturer, and this time we can just tell you, if there's a Matter logo on the box, you're fine, you're good. Because the Matter logo will ensure it can be local controlled. Home Assistant will be talking Matter with that device, and it will be local. You don't need a cloud or something.
It's a standard which really mandates local control.
Yeah,
it's also secure and encrypted and local.
Yeah,
but I think we also of course we say local, and it's like if you think about Zigbee, Z-Wave, they're local. But what puts Matter apart is that it's also over Wi-Fi. So you hear a lot of these like light bulbs. You can find them at like a lot of discount shops. They're like Wi-Fi controlled, $5 light bulb. Install like some weird app, goes through some cloud, doesn't integrate with things, and they were having an app. They were having a cloud because there wasn't an open standard that was using Wi-Fi. And so now with Matter, they will be able to put Matter on their light bulbs, and it will just work. It will work with Home Assistant, but even also with Google and Apple and Amazon and whatever other controller, of course, is going to be out there supporting Matter.
That will keep working. That's a really nice detail, because I know, for example, there were a few brands available. You purchased them, they worked for 5 minutes, and then it stopped working. And you were like, oh, okay, another failure into the trash. So this is actually really nice.
No, so I mean, when we talk about the open home, privacy, choice, and durability, Matter checks all boxes. It is locally controlled. any manufacturer can make a Matter compatible device, so you're not locked in a single manufacturer. Durability, that really still depends on the build quality. So there's no given on that.
That's true.
And one thing about choice that is really interesting is that with Matter, your light bulb or your switch or whatever Matter device you have, it can be linked with up to 5 smart home controllers. So if you're using Google today and you want to try out Home Assistant, or maybe even Apple or Amazon, you can do that without any extra effort. Like your light bulb will just support it. And any change that Home Assistant makes with a light bulb will be reflected in Google and vice versa. And all of this local. So,
yeah, I think this is a game changer. This multi-admin feature, as they call it, right? That you basically really have one IoT device which pairs with multiple ecosystems, and it makes this transition when you go from maybe from Google Home to Home Assistant, or from an Apple ecosystem into Home Assistant much more easy.
Yeah, and it's even, I don't know if you've seen the screenshots from the Google Home app. I don't think we have them prepared, but there's in the Google Home app, there will be a share button, and it will show you all the apps that are Matter compatible. And so you can, in Google Home, you'll be able to hit share, select Home Assistant, boom, your device.
It'll be as easy as that, right? It will be just share it with Apple or Home Assistant.
Yeah.
And you can have a house with Apple devices, Google devices, and if you're an outgrower, you can just move up to Home Assistant at the same time.
And just to be clear, sharing here doesn't mean that Home Assistant will then talk through Google to that device. No. Sharing really means that this device is put into so-called commissioning mode, and then the device is really directly linked to Home Assistant. So you can then shut down basically Google Home or Apple, and it would still work, right? It's really then directly linked.
Maybe we should talk, because we're like hitting now commissioning and text, but some people might not know what Matter is about. I think we have prepared a small slide to address some of the points.
This one?
Yeah, I think this one. Yeah, this one is great to have a small overview what's Matter about and what's the buzz about. Because Matter is just a protocol on top of existing protocols. So you have Wi-Fi, and on top of that will be Matter. You have Zigbee, will still be Zigbee, and you have like a bridge device. I don't know if it's in the picture or not. But there will be bridge devices talking to the existing Zigbee devices, and it will translate it into Matter. So, for example, the U bridge will be an example of that. But also IKEA released a new hub doing this.
Yeah. Now, it means that all your Philips Hue lights will just be available in Matter, just translated by you. And that's going to be great.
Yeah, and they introduced a new radio, what's it called? Protocol,
Thread.
I guess.
Radio,
protocol. Yeah. Thread, which you can see it as the next generation Zigbee. I don't know if
I feel like you should see Thread as like a low-powered Wi-Fi in a way.
Yeah.
So it is IP based, and the way it was going to work is that you're going to have devices in your house that are the link between the Thread network and your Wi-Fi network. And the way you kind of got to see that is that you have, like, if you're driving in a car, before you get to the highway, you're on like small service streets until you get to the highway. That's the Thread network. And then once you hit the highway, you go straight up to your destination, which will be your controller, which is at the highway as well.
Yeah, Thread is definitely not as fast as Wi-Fi, right? But you usually also have rather simple commands like turn on and off a light bulb, right? But there's one distinct advantage of Thread over Wi-Fi, and that is it's a mesh network. So with Thread, actually every powered device is a so-called router, right, within the Thread network, and actually relays like the signals further.
Yeah.
So with what is nice with Thread is that you really also can hit the edges and the corner of your home rather easily by just deploying more Thread devices.
Like there's a large difference between Zigbee. I think the big game changer will be the Thread border routers. I think we have to explain those too.
I think maybe just to be clear, so the mesh is very similar to Zigbee, right? But the really big difference is that in Zigbee you only have like one kind of exit to your controller.
Exit,
yes,
right?
Exactly. And with Thread you have the border routers, and there can be more than one in a network.
So I've been, we were at the Matter Alliance meeting like earlier this week. And we talked to internet providers, and internet providers are saying we are going to add thread border routers to our Wi-Fi cable modems that they are providing. So the rollout is going to go super fast.
The first one actually popped up, right? The new Nest Wi-Fi Pro.
Yes.
It already has a thread border router inside.
And I think
more will follow.
Yeah, I mean the new Apple TV,
Apple
the
TV.
HomePod.
HomePod as well,
the
and
HomePod
then
Mini.
the second gen Nest, the
Yeah,
non-Max, I
include
think
the
also.
thread border router, so you will have the thread border routers all over your house before you know it. It will be in the next few years included, and then it will.
Well, that's the next few years. I think this is like a good important point. When we talk about Matter, you're not gonna if you're a Home Assistant user, Matter is not gonna add any value because, well, you already can connect with anything. But if you're going to buy a device, I think Marcel said in the beginning, look for that Matter logo because you know it will keep working. But we think rollout where Matter is really gonna be like the main choice for everybody, probably like 5 years.
Because we were talking about the U-Bridge before. For example, the U-Bridge already talks locally to Home Assistant, so you get the best experience by using that. So you can switch to the Matter implementation, but I think it will be downgraded actually. It will be less and less experience.
It's a new protocol. I also expect some like growing pains, of course, at the beginning, right? So.
Well, even if you have to buy new hardware, right? Internet providers are going to add it for new customers, but they're not going to spend 20 million devices overnight.
Yeah. Now the real game changer will be that there will be devices available meant for Matter. Like we saw last week, we saw some devices that were actually just some small sensors meant to be working with Matter, and that will be the real game changer. Because we'll just pick up one sensor. It has Matter support. You can add it to a Home Assistant. You will not need a separate bridge. You will not need a separate app. You just add it like that. Right. That will be the real game changer. Yeah.
But of course, for that, it's important that Thread gets added to Home Assistant.
Sure.
Yeah. So Thread support. When we talk about how we're going to support Thread, I think at first when we roll out Matter, we will support Thread through. Basically Apple and the Google ecosystems, because when you onboard a device, a Thread device, through Apple or Google, it will be on their Thread network, and we can actually talk to these devices also through their border router. So that will be how we start, right?
Yes, the Thread network is neutral ground. So the Thread network is not bound to a Google Fabric. The Google Fabric sits on top.
Yeah, but we, of course, would also like to have our own Thread border router, so you don't need to actually rely on anybody else's border router. And we are working on that, so that's actually a great segue into our hardware. I mean, we worked on Yellow this year quite a bit, and besides the Yellow, we also worked on the Sky Connect, which we see over there. So these are the two hardware we have been working on, and maybe Paulus, you have some thought.
Well, so the Home Assistant Yellow we launched a little bit over last year, and they're actually finally shipping. I think you're going to go into some detail there, but they have a chip built in that can do both Zigbee and they can do Thread, and it means that your Home Assistant instance will become a Thread border router, because it is great that we can do things through Google and Apple, but in the end, we don't want to push reliance on Google and Apple products on our users, right? It's about choice. So we're going to make sure that Home Assistant Yellow can be your Thread border router. But of course, not everybody has a Yellow. In fact, the super tiny amount has a Yellow because we're just rolling it out. So we wanted, of course, to not make it exclusive. So we added a chip that that provides Thread in the Yellow. And we added that to the Home Assistant Sky Connect, which is a small USB stick that has this chip on. And if you put it on it's somewhere there.
We can show it.
I mean, it's too tiny, I think, to see on the camera. But you put this chip inside a Raspberry Pi, or your Home Assistant instance on a virtual machine or whatever. Home Assistant sees the chip, Home Assistant operating system right now will be able to upgrade it to a Thread border router, and you're in business.
We're working on an add-on, and so with the Home Assistant operating system, you can just install that add-on, and then it will actually support both Thread and Zigbee. It's still work in progress, so we still need to iron out things there, but that's the plan. But so to maybe say again that this is kind of where we want to go. at first, probably the existing thread border routers will probably be the easier and more tested way to actually get thread matter devices into your network.
And it will, in theory, it's possible to get all the thread border routers meshed together, but there is
theory, right?
theory.
So
We talked to a lot of companies like, hey, how would Google do this? How does it work on iOS? And it seems that there is some infrastructure, but it's not like, so we still have to figure it all out. It's all theory.
It will be good news. If it is, it's really good news because you can just put up some hardware in your house and you'll have a whole house mesh
the goal
network.
would be that if you have a border router in your Home Assistant Yellow, that could be used by Google as well, because thread border
That's
routers.
the idea in the 1.3 spec, I believe.
If they are all the same network, then there needs to be software support to basically synchronize this.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. Yeah. So maybe when we go back to Yellow, I have some numbers there. What we did so far. I mean, we learned hardware is hard.
Very hard.
That's probably why.
It's in the name.
And I guess this year, with the chip shortage and then all the other kind of things coming together, it took us longer than we anticipated.
It was so annoying, right?
Yellow.
Because we anticipated a chip shortage. It's not like we came in like blank. Like we saw chip shortage.
It was already ongoing when we launched the project.
We already did revisions before we launched, and we already had selected products that were supposed to be available, and still we got burned.
But still over the months we were actually able to start shipping, and we actually shipped I think about 2,000 units at this point. There's actually a second batch right now on a vessel. It should be by the end of November. It should be in Long Beach. That's 2,300 units. With that, most of the initial backers should then actually receive their units or all of them. And furthermore, we have the PoE variant finally passed through all the regulatory approvals. So we actually started production of the PoE units. So there are 2,500 PoE units produced right now, and they will be shipped in probably a week or two, and then shipped to the warehouse, right, in the US, and then from there to you backers. So, but the current date there so you actually can expect it will be January 2023.
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic that we make this date happen. Yeah. And then besides that, we also worked quite a bit on documentation. So there's actually a website. I'm not sure if you saw it. It's yellow.homeassistant.io, and it's kind of mostly to get you started. So when you basically receive the unit, that you know how to actually get it going, right?
Nice, right? It's part of the user experience. Starts here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, I like the guide for the Yellow because it's plug in the internet, power it up, you're done. Which is
that one is nice.
Yes. The kit is a little bit more work.
Plug it in.
Yeah, I think the thing is that our kit is a little bit more work because you have to get your own Compute Module 4, Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4, which A, is very hard. And B, you need to install Home Assistant on that Compute Module 4 before you can use it, right? So the stuff you get from us, you plug in the CM4, that part is easy. Then you have to get the installer, put it on a USB stick. Also easy, but not as easy as the...
Yeah, it's a couple of steps, but also with these guides, it should be fairly straightforward to actually get it done. And then, besides that, we have also some hardware documentation, so that's kind of cool. That's actually, we tap into kind of the open source ecosystems there. For instance, the whole Yellow has actually been designed using KiCad, which is an open source PCB design software. And so the KiCad design data we then exported with also an open source tool called Pinion into this nice graphic you can see here to basically explore your Yellow board. It's kind of cool that you just with go over these different pins, kind of see what is where and explore the board. Besides that, we also open source the schematics. The schematics are already up for download, and it's also the plan to open source the full PCB design.
Yeah. So that means in theory you could also build your own Home Assistant Yellow, but I think it's mainly meant for, like, we had a lot of challenges with like PoE, getting all those things right, and we feel like, you know, if other people are gonna make boards like that evolve around the Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4, we just hope that it helps, right? Like, we spend a lot of time and resources getting it right, and like, yeah, let more people build hardware.
Yeah.
All right, so that was the first part.
Yep, this wraps up the hardware part.
Yeah.
This wraps up the whole first part, right? So
Right, so now for the break, we're hitting the break, a 10-minute break, but we have a very special performance planned. It's a performance by Vincent Schoutsen, my brother. He's a musician, inventor, artist here in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And we asked him, like, can you use our technologies that we use day to day and, you know, make this into like a musical instrument? And he combined it with some other stuff that you can find in the home. So this is built using Arduinos and sensors and solenoids, relays, and, well, enjoy the show.
And welcome back. Thank you, Vincent, for that workout, at least. You're sweating. Looks great, thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
So, we're back here for the second part of tonight. Well, depends on where you are, I guess, for us it's night. And we're going to talk about streamlining experience, which has been the theme this year for Home Assistant. And
First of all, who are you?
And I'm Frank. Hi. I write the release notes in general. That's what most people probably will know me about.
And you're joined by...
My name is Matthias. I'm the user experience designer for Nabu Casa.
And
And I'm Bron. I front-end developer for Home Assistant.
so it all started this year with streamlining experiences. And actually it's Paulus that wrote a blog post beginning and early this year on our focus this year. So for many years we had like making things easier. That has been the slogan for many years, right? But it didn't quite cut it actually. So like it doesn't cover all, right?
Well, Bron did a lot of stuff.
Well, I think Home Assistant got easier over the years. So
Yeah, it did.
I think we accomplished some goals.
We did, although, make so many things easier that the UI like became cluttered in many places, or things were not logical anymore, and like things were just put in, right?
Yeah, we were lacking some guidance, some guidelines, and mainly some UX designing. We were all technical people, and
Glad to have him. That's
so
for
we're
sure.
very happy to have a UX designer now, Matthias, who can help us with that.
So one of the things we did this year is things like reducing terminology, like making terminology easier to understand for with terms that people are more familiar with nowadays, right?
Yeah.
So one of the biggest things I know is Lovelace is gone.
Yeah, that's a big one, right? So a lot of people know, when was it, in 2019, something like that, that Lovelace was introduced?
I'm not sure.
Longer even, I don't know.
It depends when it was a long time in beta, and it was like but eventually it went default.
Yeah, so the current, what we are calling dashboards, right, was called like a project name Lovelace, I guess, and that's is a nice name and that sticked around.
Yeah, forever.
So a lot of people are calling their dashboards Lovely dashboards, and that it's still a sticky name. But if you're new to Home Assistant and you see Lovelace, you probably don't have a clue what that means, right? So
No.
So it's now just dashboard. And I think that's perfectly fine. Like this is part of streamlining, making things like easier and better to understand and make the UI more streamlined. Some other things I wrote down earlier was snapshots became backups.
Yep.
I think that's a good one. A media browser just became media. Like that's a simple one. It just
But it became more than just a browser. It's now even a media player and as progress bars and stuff. So,
Definitely.
Yeah.
So it's all to less overwhelm new users. And it's not just aimed at UI either. Like we've been doing YAML changes as well, making that more streamlined into the experience. So I think it's a good theme we did this year. So let's see what we did this year. Let's go over it.
Yeah.
But before we do that, actually, now you're on the table. If you want to streamline this experience, which you obviously master,
I hope so.
I think you do. I think you do. Who are your users actually?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as a user experience designer, it all starts with you guys, like the users. We design stuff for people. We're not creating stuff in general. And we divided you guys as users in 3 different kind of user groups, basically. I have to speak. So the first is outgrowers. And what we mean with outgrowers are people that most of the time start with other kind of stuff. For example, Google Home,
HomeKit.
HomeKit, yeah,
Right.
exactly. And they start with it, they get interested in it, but in the end, it doesn't fit very well. They can do it as much as Home Assistant can do, and they want something more, and they search around, and most of the time, they end up with Home Assistant.
But what is it that they look for? Is it like integrations or like automations or?
Yeah, so especially for HomeKit, it's like it's an ecosystem that's
Right.
really close, right? So if you buy some other brand that doesn't work with your HomeKit device, yeah, then you're locked out. Google, for example, you can create automations, but yeah, the automation engine of Home Assistant is it's amazing, right? You can do a lot of stuff.
It is. We're going to talk about the automation engine later.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
And the second is what we are calling our tinkerers. Tinkerer is probably a familiar terminology for you guys as Home Assistant people, and that are like more the technical users that know what to do. They maybe have like a big system. They tinker around. They know how to code. They know how to do.
The more technical people that really want to dive in
Exactly.
and get their hands dirty and
People are using basically ESPHome, right? Like
Exactly.
people that like
Yeah.
those kind of things, like building their own devices.
Yeah.
Like that's the thinker. I would be probably.
I guess.
the thinker.
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah. And the last one are questioners. Questioners. Let me pronounce it correct. That are people that are interested in technology, but maybe don't have the skill set yet to do that, but they want to learn it, and they use like Home Assistant as a hobby. Well, most of these three people are using Home Assistant as a hobby, but they want to learn and they have questions, and they found the community to help them out.
Right.
okay, yeah. So they want to just get more technical and learn more about the technical
Yeah.
stuff through Home Assistant.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you've got a lot of examples of people that have different kind of backgrounds, and they open Visual Studio Code, and they start creating all kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of nice to see. I see a lot of users that start doing Home Assistant and find it like hard, and it's less hard nowadays, but still you can learn so much throughout the process. Like if you like completely blank with YAML and you start with doing YAML and then starting doing templates, and before you know it, you're actually learning maybe a bit how to code. It's not really coding, but it's like a good step up. But yeah, those are like the last group of questioners that grow from one point to, and maybe, well, they are already outgrown other systems at that point. But
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
cool. So what did we do this year?
A lot.
So I actually went through all the release notes for this and looking.
Frank
at
even
everything.
printed it out, right?
Yeah, I printed them all out. It's bad for the environment, but I just wanted to have a marker and highlight. It's a huge stack, and it's impressive. It's impressive everything we've put out this year, not just us, but everybody that contributed, like these things, right? That's just amazing. So one of the big things I want to start to talk about we did beginning this year, which is a big streamlining change, are helpers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did helpers. So helpers in Home Assistant previous were limited to a fixed set. Like there were a couple of helpers there to have an input switch or something, a switch helper switch.
Yeah, helpers,
number,
input,
date.
mainly inputs.
List, drop down list, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we started bringing in other ones, and we brought in Riemann integral, utility meter.
Utility meter.
Like there are 17 now, so
Yeah.
it's hard. Like we cannot think about them, but yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah.
And well, actually, I have a screenshot of all of them. Can I show that?
Yep.
There it is. So that's quite a big list, like a derivative. I was trying
Let me, yeah.
a threshold, a timer. It's a lot.
A group.
And that's the big one. That's the big one. And that was actually the title of the release, right? It was Groups was the release title back in March, I believe. Sorry if I'm wrong. Which brought in groups to the UI.
Yeah, so groups were already possible, but they were limited to YAML.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're now streamlined, so everybody can use them directly from the UI.
Yeah.
And a little nice touch there was the hidden entities. So if you made a group of lights, then it would hide all the lights and create like this new light, just which represents.
So if
the
you
whole
have a
group.
fixture with 3 different bulbs in them, you make a group, and all the individual lights are hidden, so you end up with one light you can control.
Exactly.
And that's also shown up like one light in Google Home, for example, right? So
Yeah.
the hidden lights of the 3 lights you've made a group of doesn't show up again in Google Home. So that's really neat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what I also liked in the helpers release we did with groups, there was actually another one, which is the change the device type of a switch.
Yep.
I believe I have a little screenshot of how that works. It's just a really small touch of an entity open, a switch entity, and you can change the type of the device.
Yeah.
And that's because of like wall plugs and such, right?
Yeah, wall plugs and the Sonos switches and stuff.
Or the built-in ones for the wall. And such.
Yeah, yeah. I have one for my fan, for example, for my bathroom fan, so I can make it a fan instead of a switch. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's super cool that those two got added. So this is actually still available in YAML too. So this is all helpers are available in YAML if you like that, but are available via the UI as well. So that's really nice. So that was the streamlining of the experience. Everybody could use it in YAML before, and now they can use it in the UI too if that's more your thing.
Yeah,
so that was
it's just so much easier now.
right. So another thing we did this year, the units of measurement, which is still ongoing actually.
It is.
It
very much is.
It very much is, right?
Yeah.
So what we did with the unit of measurement is that we now allow to change the unit you prefer. And previously this was only possible building your own like templates entities in code to like convert, I don't know, Celsius to Fahrenheit or kilowatt hour to watt hour, I believe, things like that.
Yeah.
I have a little screenshot as well prepared, which shows it. Like it's a really simple change now, and for most entities that's not possible. And yeah, actually, it just removes templating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a small thing actually, but it's so helpful. It's like
simple drop down, right?
Yeah, it's just a drop down. You just select the unit of measurement you want to use, and that's it.
And there we go.
Yeah.
So this could be helpful for things like, for example, 3D printers.
Yep.
Because 3D printers are odd. We use Celsius everywhere in the world for the temperatures of these, or wind speeds. Some countries have different wind speed units of measurement, so you can change the unit of measurements of other entities.
You can even use Kelvin if you want, right?
You can?
Can?
Can you?
I think you can, right?
Would be cool. So that's kind of cool, and it's EPNet and Eric that actually have been overhauling this last month, and there's still a lot of work to do there. So there are many more units of measurement changes options coming there. And one of the things that actually, I don't know, this isn't in there yet. I'm not sure if this is like already for here, but it's precision.
Yeah, that's not in there.
That's not there yet.
Yeah.
But is it coming? Do you know?
It might be. It might just be. Yeah, it might just be. Like, precision is a thing. A lot of people, like, they want to show some things with more precision or less than we provide the entities with. And, like, it's super useful if you can just say, hey, I don't care about precision for this sensor. Or, hey, I want a super precise measurement because I don't know why you want that, but
I think I would love some on my dashboards, like some places where I, like, just on the dashboard, I wouldn't care about like 5 digits behind the comma.
Exactly. Yeah.
But maybe I do care when I calculate with it.
yeah, you always get like differences if you run stuff.
Cool.
So getting differences in raw values and the values you want to display, that's something we might see.
Yeah, it will be really cool. Yeah.
Something else in the works is that we're now working on adding country support to Home Assistant, so you can select your country, so it can better determine your things like the default units it should show when you add a device for the first time. I think that's really cool. So you don't have to use this function that much anymore even. It should be great by default out of the box, right? So the experience out of the box should be better. I think that's cool, that's being worked on.
Yeah, exactly. So smart defaults, it's a big one.
It's a big one.
Later on,
Hopefully.
more.
Yeah, is that later on more? Oh, I'm spoiling
No,
too
not
much.
spoil it.
I'm spoiling too much.
No,
I
no,
should
no.
stop.
No, that's okay.
Let's talk about a different subject. It's another one I wrote down, and this is like a term most people are probably not familiar with. It's selectors.
Yeah, selectors.
Selectors was a big deal this year. So selectors are a thing that you see in things like a blueprint, for example. If you go to a blueprint and you have to configure something like select an entity or a color or a toggle to turn things on and off, those are individual selector types, right? Like the color selector and stuff like that.
Yeah, and a blueprint is really where the user can use a selector to create his inputs for the blueprint automation.
Yeah.
But you see selectors in the UI in a lot more places. Like we introduced them in the config flows.
Yes.
And the option flows. And actually all
That's
over the
when
UI.
you're setting up like a new integration.
Yeah, when you're adding an integration, like in the past when you have to select an entity for an integration, it was only possible with a drop-down with all your entities and it was not displayed nicely, or you had to type it into a text field. And now with all the types of selectors, we can just give you an entity picker or a device picker or area picker, or we have a lot of selectors now that,
so one
that
of
can
the
be used.
most famous selectors added probably to most watches right now is the icon picker.
Yeah.
That's actually made by Paul.
Yeah.
Will be joining later, but the icon picker, like you just can select the icon from a list. That was a great addition, and that's an excellent example of a selector. Basically.
Yeah.
So what we did this year is adding tons of selectors to provide more UI experience. So I made a list. Let me quickly go through them. It's a color picker, location selector, the icon picker, theme picker, time picker, daytime pickers that you worked on actually, I believe. We even built a template selector, so you could like write templates in a code editor. So that's kind of nice. The big one, however,
Yeah, is that the big one?
I think this was the big one we did.
It's a nice one, that's for sure.
Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
So that's,
I think I know what you're talking about.
Can you get a screenshot up? There we go.
Yeah, it is a big one.
That's a big one, right? It's the media selector. I think this changed the game of what we did with selectors, like being able to pick something from your media.
It's really all easy for me. So I create an automation when somebody presses the doorbell, for example, during Christmas Eve, and you press the doorbell, it gives the Home Alone tune of whatever of the movie, and it was very easy to do. Just the media selector.
Yeah. So it's not only used in blueprints and in setting up integrations, but it's actually also used in creating your own automation. Because, the services actually also use selectors.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice. This is the bridge, by the way, for me into automations, because we want to talk about automations, because automations was a big deal this year as well.
It was a big revamp, right? Yeah.
The automation editor. You want to talk about it, Bram?
Well, I think it's improved like a much. It shows that Frank can do front end, because we needed a lot of work on the automation editor actually.
So this is kind of weird, but this just happened actually at the time, right? I do have a screenshot of how it looked. In case you forgot, there's a screenshot of how it looked, and it was a lot.
Yeah, it
there
was
were a lot of fields.
Yeah.
Well, especially the first thing you see is not the automation, but how it's called, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Details. Yeah. So now it looks like this. And that's just clean.
Yeah. Way more compact, way more, you can just see what will happen. We made this nice descriptions of your actions and your triggers and your conditions. So it's just visible in a glance what this automation is going to do.
Nicely collapsed as well.
Yeah,
I like that one.
Yeah,
I believe Paul came up with that one.
It was so, especially if you had a choose or an if, or like the nested ones, they were so big and huge, and you could not see what was happening.
The descriptions that makes it more readable for the human, right?
Yeah.
So,
you just open it and you see it at a glance, right? You just have a single, like, quick overview of what it is, what it's doing, and what's it going to do, and what the conditions are, and everything that's in it. I think that's great. And then Paul added the reordering
Yeah,
drag and drop.
drag and drop.
Drag and drop.
Yeah,
Magical drag and drop. That was epic, actually.
really cool.
That was cool. And what I liked the most about this all is it made it like really useful and actually usable for the first time on mobile.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a big one. Yeah.
Definitely.
So besides this, we did a lot of more work on the automation editor. Things like we have now calendar triggers and if-then was added, and well, a bunch of more, I think. So it's not just UI. We actually made it more powerful as well.
Yeah,
So that's-
and actually for the YAML users, we also like we want to draw them into the UI. We want to show them what's possible. Like they've never used the UI probably because it was not really useful, or
Well,
it
you
was
get
too.
that icon, right? That's blocked. You cannot. You've seen that you've got an automation, but you
You
couldn't.
got a
open it.
message like this is a
Yeah, that's why you try to. But I mean, they never even created automations in the UI because it was like,
you didn't know how it would look, right?
yeah, that
Maybe it's
too.
that. So what we actually did this year is adding the possibility to load up your YAML automations into the automation editor just for viewing. I do have a little screenshot of that. It will show like a little bar of like,
Yeah.
hey, this is like the automations. This is a YAML automation, and you can actually migrate it.
Yeah, you can just view it like you would view an automation that was created in the UI. And then you have one button to migrate it to a UI automation. It's actually just a copy. It copies it.
Right. I got a little
Note.
hinge note. Hold up there. Thank you, Paul. It's there is a little bit noise in the background. We have a train track behind
Yeah,
us.
I believe there was a disturbance on the
Yeah.
station before, and now the trains are running again.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of trains.
It's a lot of trains all of a sudden, and Joachim tries to make me say choo-choo. I did it at this point. Thank you, Joachim. So that's why there's a little bit of noise in the background. Sorry for that. So yeah, the automation editor, that was actually pretty darn amazing, and it really came together like almost spontaneous.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
contributors, a lot of people worked on it.
And that's really, for me, it was really fun to watch how you guys, like what you said, it happened and really fast, and a lot of people jumped on it, and yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, and during this, there were also other things streamlining, like the things we talk about today about streamlining. It's not all of it. We did tons of little things. Like in this thing, I believe I added the icons, little icons in every single menu, and it was rolled out into a whole lot of Home Assistant in the
that's
same release.
so nice.
It was
It's,
a
it's
little
such a little touch,
detail.
but it adds so much. That's just really cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then another release came up, and this is already later in the year, and we added something new. And this project has been in the work for a really long time and has been known by the working title Resolution Center.
Oh.
Which was eventually dubbed because, well, to make things like short and simple, repairs.
Exactly.
After long discussions.
Well, that thing has been in the works so long because it could have had it has a big impact. Actually, for me, it has big impact.
Yeah.
It is.
I think it's a really epic feature. It's really cool.
So let me quickly tell what repairs is. Repairs is a place in Home Assistant where you can go where Home Assistant will raise issues about your system to you. Like it will tell you that you have an issue in your system somewhere and notify you about it and tells you how to fix it. So each thing in the Resolution Center, I want to say Resolution Center again. No, each thing in the repair dashboard that you see there is actionable. And I think that's a great difference compared to like a generic notification.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, it used to be in your log somewhere, and you
Right.
you really had to search for it, and then most of the time there was not really an action you could do to fix it. So then you would have to search in the community or Google and find a solution, and that's just now all gone.
This is really game changer for like the people that are not that have a technical background, that are what we are calling the outgrowers. They used to like it just works, and then you start with Home Assistant, and then someday it doesn't work anymore. Now you've got a repair, and you can fix it.
Absolutely, and we use it for different things, as you said, but it's also used for things like deprecations. Like all YAML features that, like integrations that migrate from the old YAML into UI, that used to be like a breaking change. And right now it will just tell you, hey, you have old configuration, you can just clean up.
Yeah,
And
you can
then
just
it's
remove
gone.
it.
And then remove it. It helps you keep your system clean, right? And it prevents like breaking changes along the way. So I think that's really cool. But also things like automations that make calls to things that are not there
Services
yet.
that not exist. And
Yeah. So it helps you. Like, it's not like after a week you notice that the automation doesn't work anymore. It just tells you something is wrong.
yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, really helpful.
So that is repairs.
Next up.
Next up,
There's more?
there's more. And for this one, we have like no images at all, but this is one of the points that has been in almost every single release. And it has been to a point where I had troubles on describing to users what it is actually. And it was in almost every single release. And I'm going to call out Draco for this one.
Oh,
I'm going to thank him for it as well, because he did an amazing job. It's performance.
yeah.
There has been so much work on performance this year, and it's like I don't even know. What do you have to tell about it? Like it's reducing bandwidth.
Bandwidth, memory, processing power, like he went everywhere. He searched for the last drop of performance everywhere. It's like, it's really crazy what he did. Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of cool. He did that, and there's so many more in there. It's just the database is smaller, the SD cards are saved, like less stress on them, I guess. The front end loads faster.
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
Yeah. One thing is like the state updates are way optimized now. They send a lot less data. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the stored data in the database is also less,
Yeah.
and the backups are smaller.
Exactly.
It's great.
Really cool.
So thank you for that again, Draco. That's amazing. Then we added update entities.
Update entities. Yeah.
Update entities. Where are we using those?
A lot of places.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I think that it, again, is really cool. It helps you update Home Assistant, the supervisor, the operating system, but also all your add-ons, devices that support it. Z-Wave has updates now. and-
Z-Wave, indeed. That was a
Yeah.
big one this year. Yasco.
Yeah.
I believe
Exactly.
was one of the pushes in that.
Yeah, it's really cool that you can now just update everything and you have a central overview of all the updates available, and you can just install them with one click of the button.
Or even ignore if you think, well,
Yeah.
it's not for me.
Yeah. And it works. Like every integration can provide update entities. So basically every single like integration, even like Unify. For example, if you have a Unify integration running with a Unify like a network application
Yeah.
running, Home Assistant will tell you like your AP needs, your access point needs an update.
Yeah.
And you can just click in Home Assistant to update it, which is
Yeah.
just cool.
The Shelly
like magic,
devices,
right?
It's magic, yes.
Shelly
Exactly.
devices, you can just update them, I
Yeah.
think.
And add-ons, of course, and Home Assistant itself, not forget about Home Assistant itself, and the OS that does it too automatically. So that's a nice one.
Yeah. Are we gonna talk more about that updates of Home Assistant, or is that not up yet?
Updates of Home Assistant.
Supervisor and
You're talking about something that is pretty sensitive to some people.
what?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, this is controversial. No,
Oh.
it's not. It's great. And I'm going to show you it's great. We're going to talk about, I think we should talk about the settings menu, because that is one thing that caused a lot of rumor in the community this year.
It was a big change, right?
It was a big change.
Yeah.
And it was a big visual change. I actually installed an old version of Home Assistant, like a year-old one, to get back how our, at that time still named, configuration manual looked like. Can I get a screenshot? Here we go. That's how
Yeah.
it looked. What do you think?
Different?
it's a lot more.
Yeah.
I know, like last year, we were in the metaverse, right? Bram and I were
Yeah,
You were
drawing-
discussing it.
we were
were
discussing
discussing
it.
it,
Yeah, yeah, that was the start of this, and we went throughout the year to optimize it, to finalize it, and a lot of discussions went into this. and
We've drawn a lot of mock-ups, a lot of
Yeah.
concepts, and we did even a user test.
Yeah.
Like over 900 people joined that user test,
Really?
and for me, it's
Oh,
it's
wow.
a lot, right? So we get a lot of feedback on what kind of concept do we want, and yeah, we ended what we have right now.
So it was not just that settings menu I just showed. We had another one.
Yeah.
Yes, we had, and that's even back in the day it was called Has.io menu, and later it became the supervisor menu, right? So we had a supervisor menu in the sidebar too,
Yep.
besides the the configuration menu.
Yeah.
That was the name. So we had a supervisor menu. I made a screenshot of that as well, just to show you that this was there too. And this was another place where you could update, you could do network settings, you could change all kinds of things. Basically, it was settings too.
Yeah. It was.
It was.
Yeah.
And considering this is supervisor, it means somebody is running supervised or Home Assistant OS probably. So that would be like over 70, 75%, even more than that, I believe,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
users.
Most users would have
Two menus.
two configuration menus, basically. Yeah.
So you merged it.
We did. So we did it, I think, in December 2021, around that time. That was the
Yeah.
first step in, like,
Yeah.
cleaning up stuff, like merging, and first step, have one single configuration menu item.
Yeah. Get all the logs with the logs and not one log in the configuration and the rest in the supervisor
There's
menu.
now one menu item for network settings, not two.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like that.
Network settings and restarting, updating, everything is now combined and logical grouped.
So I made a couple of screenshots how it looks now on mobile even. Can I get those up? Right? And it looks like, compare what we saw just a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
This is colorful.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's colorful, it has icons. And why is that?
So we add icons, and what icons we already got, right? But we add the color to make it more distinctive, what kind of menu items there are, to make it easier to recognize where you want to go, basically.
Over time you're going to recognize the color and then quickly jump in.
Yeah, that's
And it just looks a lot better, I think.
also, yeah.
Nothing wrong with a bit of color there, I guess. So you did a lot of UX for this.
We did, yeah. If I did, but basically we had a lot of discussions. Yeah, so I just mentioned we did a user test. We did a lot of interviews with different kind of people. A lot.
We're going to change more, right?
We are.
You want to tell about it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Okay. I'm going to
Let's
leave.
do it.
I'm going to thank you all, and I wish you good luck. on,
Thank you.
Telling you about whatever is coming to the UI.
A bit about the future, maybe.
Thank you.
Places.
Look who's here.
Hello, I'm Paul, and I'm the mushroom custom card developer. I joined Nabu Casa last September, and I work on the front-end part.
Yeah, exactly. And like mentioned, you've done quite some stuff already, right? Before Nabu Casa even. So that's really cool. So what we are gonna discuss, and maybe you guys gonna love it, we are curious what you would think about it also, is about the future.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of things. We've changed a lot of things, but things you don't see, we also think about how Home Assistant should be in the future. And there's a lot of discussion about how it should look and how it could
Exactly,
look
yeah.
and what we can improve.
Exactly. And it's something everybody got an opinion about, right? So what you are seeing is you can comment on that or whatever. So keep in mind what we are going to show you right now probably don't be like the real thing in the end.
No.
It's like a concept, and that
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah, it's what we have right now, but it might be different tomorrow.
exactly.
Yeah.
And but to start off is why are we creating this concept? And the first thing what we want to touch upon is why we think you guys are using Home Assistant. And that's something like Paulus already mentioned, is the shared values with the open home. We think you guys like Home Assistant because it's value your privacy, it gives you choice and durability. and because the technology gives you like the magic of technology, right? The Home Assistant gives you the power to automate your home, and that improves your quality of life. It's free and open source. That's also a benefit, right? Like a lot of people just can install it. But if you ask around right now, we have been working on making things easier, and we are getting feedback from you guys and from like in the media and other kind of places that things are getting easier, but we aren't there yet, right?
No, definitely not.
No, so
No.
easier to use, that's something we still want to continue working on.
Yeah.
And so first off, I'm gonna show, that's the wrong one. Oh yeah, it's working, right? So.
No, this one. No, it should be.
It should be. Yeah, cool. So at Nabu Casa, we are using Figma. Figma is a design tool to create. That's thanks for. Cool. Yeah. Figma is a tool to create designs and to create. It should.
No.
Okay, continue. Okay. Is create designs and create prototypes. So what we are showing right now is a prototype of things we have in mind to maybe introduce the Home Assistant. And first off is like we want to call smart defaults. So smart defaults, what we mentioned with that is making things easier out of the box, right?
Yeah. If you set up Home Assistant now, you are greeted with a weather card, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Maybe the device it discovered, but other than that, like Home Assistant gives you a lot of building blocks. It allows you to do a lot of stuff, but you have to build it yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that requires knowledge, and that requires you to learn how to use it. And I think we can do better. I think we can give a useful experience when you first start using Home Assistant.
Exactly.
Yeah, because we have rooms and device assigned to rooms, so maybe we can add default dashboard based on rooms, and we can do it better than just a full list on the
Exactly.
with all the entity. Yeah.
And maybe you noticed if you look on this prototype, in the last release we introduced a new card.
Yeah, the tile card
The tile card.
is heavily inspired by Mushroom.
Exactly.
Mushroom
Yeah.
card. And it's just the beginning to improve the dashboard and add a new design with a new style and a colorful style.
Exactly.
And next release we will add more things like this. Yeah.
Exactly. So.
But I think this is the start of like a new design language, right? The tile card is not like just another card,
Yeah.
like the other cards. We've seen people mention like the tile card doesn't fit with the other cards, and the design is different. But I think that's intentional, right?
Yeah.
Because there's an ID. The
Yeah.
tile card is just the start of that.
Is the start of that. And behind the tile, sorry for background noise. Behind the tile card is also what we are calling the more info dialog. Right now, the more info dialog is a lot of data, but that could get. Let me open that. For example, what's a better example? Is, for example, the thermostat card. If you open the thermostat, more info dialog, you just want to see easy and want to control it easy, straight from there, right? And also what we are trying to do is when Home Assistant started, a dashboard was built upon on entities.
Yeah.
But in the end, you buy a device, right?
Yeah, yeah, and the entities are not really grouped together right now.
No.
We try to group them by device in the auto-generated dashboard and by area otherwise, but it gets crowded and it gets a lot.
Exactly.
And yeah, we want to make it more device-orientated, device-based. So less emphasis on the entities, but more on the device and what the device can do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you have, for example, a device powered by a battery, we can display, for example, the battery next to the value of the sensor.
Yeah.
And or the power of the plug, for example.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right now we have a lot of configuration entities, like entities that are there to control the device, and right now it's actually pretty hard to get to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we can do better.
So about the smart defaults, what we are thinking also about is default automations. We have created blueprints, and that's a great foundation to build up like default automation. So if we know what kind of devices in what area, we can suggest like, hey, you've got a motion sensor and you've got a light. Maybe you want to combine those in a automation, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff is also what we are concepting.
Yeah, so that would be just an automation that you can enable with a click of a button.
Exactly.
Instead of having to
Just toggle
create
it
the
on.
automation, search for the devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so what we also discussed was about the Material Design 3 has been released for a year now, I guess, something like that.
Oh, you're going there.
Yeah. And we also want to implement that. That's also a given because we have chosen to use Material Design and we also like it. So it's got like a more modern feeling, but that's also depending on your...
A bigger border radius.
It's a bigger border radius. That's a big one. If you, I've seen it in the community. Yeah. So that's really what you're gonna see in the future. Definitely is more Material Design 3.
Yeah, but I think it's also important to note that these are the defaults. We're following a material, but if you don't like it, you can always overrule them and
Absolutely.
create your own team and create it as you want.
Yep. Exactly. Also, one thing we are discussing is we don't have the numbers, we don't have the analytics in our application, but what I'm assuming is that most of you guys are most of the time in the settings menu and not on your dashboard, because you are tweaking with your Home Assistant, you're creating automations. So one thing we might do is move automations and devices out of the settings menu and just move to a dedicated menu item. That could be, we're definitely going to test this and listen to your feedback, but that's something right now we have in mind.
So there will be more user tests next year?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
We're going to test more.
Can people sign up for that?
They can. I will post a link on my Twitter, or we're going to post that on my Home Assistant Twitter.
In a blog post or a
blog
release
post.
note?
Exactly. So more about it later on. We discussed the settings, the revamp of our settings. We've done like 2 iterations right now, so in December and in March this year, and some more small tweaks, I guess, this year. So maybe three changes right now. I'm not saying we're going to change a lot more. So the basic structure is there, but what we want to do is to give the user more control about your whole system, basically. So right now, if you have set a theme, you set a theme for your as a profile, but maybe you want to set a theme for your system, and that you can override as a profile user. So.
Yeah, that's something you have to call a service for now, and which is not very user friendly.
Yeah. So we have added a appearance menu item to the settings menu, where you can set a default menu order or hide menu items or set a default theme, that kind of stuff.
A lot of options.
A lot of options, yeah.
Okay.
Would be cool if we have that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot of requested feature, I guess.
Because now it's only YAML for theme.
It is
not very accessible. So.
No, exactly. So there's a lot more to discuss in this concept.
Yeah.
Basically, what we have is the smart defaults, like we discussed, more about devices instead of entities. Manage more in the UI. We don't forget YAML, but we think we can make the UI even more easier to use.
Will that include drag and drop?
Yeah. Because
That's for you, Paul.
yeah, for now we only use masonry layout for the default dashboard, and it can be hard for user to understand how card organize between desktop and mobile.
Yeah,
So,
now if you move a card up, it might jump.
yeah, because
the
of
way.
the size of the card.
Yeah.
And what we want is to introduce section. So sections are present in the mockup. Each room is a section, and you will organize your card. You can move your card using drag and drop to move them inside, and it will be easier to change the organization of the dashboard, even in the default dashboard.
Exactly. That does mean that the current cards, we have to check what kind of cards can be used, right? So not every card. So for example, what I have in mind is the bigger thermostat card, with the big slider.
Yeah.
That's a big one. I'm guessing that wouldn't be used.
No, but also something like the entities card with multiple row.
Yeah,
That would no longer fit in the new concept.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's something we have to figure out still, right? So we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it looks cool. Let's see what we can make of this
Exactly.
coming year.
So next up, I'm gonna plug in this headset because I'm gonna have a small chat with Steve. Steve, hi, how are you there? Hello, hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can
All
you
right.
hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Steve. So Steve has done a lot of kind of PRs about accessibility, and that's also a big subject for user experience, right? And especially for people that, well, I think Steve can explain it even better. So next up is Steve, and he's gonna explain about accessibility.
All right. Hello, everybody. I thought I would start by just a very, very, very brief introduction on myself. I'm actually come from a aerospace engineering background. That's been my career for a long time, and I work on something called computational fluid dynamics, which means I'm a big nerd that uses computers to solve big equations and stuff. That usually ends up, ironically for me, ending up in pretty pictures and complicated plots. And I say ironic because I'm also legally blind. I started losing my vision when I was about 16, and it's to the point now where I can't see whether you guys can see me well, and I mostly use a screen reader to access my computer and everything I do, including Home Assistant. So I've been a Home Assistant user for a while now, and I started putting in my contributions through pull requests and issues within the past year, and tried to really amp that up, spend a bunch of my free time on it. So I'm going to Paul has asked me to give a short presentation on what I've been up to. I thought I would start with just a very, very, very brief crash course on just accessibility in general to level set everybody. So what are the couple of basics when we talk about, and specifically when we talk about Home Assistant and other web type content? So level set definition on accessibility. We're talking about designing products, users, spaces, environments, things like that, specifically for people with disabilities. And this has a strong overlap with terms like universal design, which, so the classic example would be that, you put in curb cuts on sidewalks for wheelchairs, that's accessibility. But it also helps people with strollers and carts and stuff like that. May not be specifically for disabilities, but it's universal design and helps everybody. And like Paul said, user experience is a big part of this, and accessibility is basically just a very specialized type of user experience design. And in general, though, when you increase accessibility through various techniques and stuff that we'll talk about, usability for everybody tends to go up. Very simple example is keyboard accessibility is an absolute must for people using assistive technologies like screen readers. But you'll find a lot of annoyed people that want to use their screen reader or want to use their keyboard as well. And if it doesn't work, there you go. So for web content and information communication technology in general, what's that really mean in practice? It means that it works without any disadvantage to anyone else. If it sucks for everybody, then I guess it's going to suck for people with disabilities. But if it works very, very well for everybody else, then you want it to work well for people with disabilities without a big disadvantage in terms of time to complete a task, et cetera, et cetera. So guidelines and specifications. So sort of the de facto international standard for creating accessible web content and has been extended to apps and electronic interfaces in general is the W3C Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These and all W3C documents are put out by working groups. So there's an accessibility guidelines working group. I was a former member for that for my former company, and then an invited expert for years. I was pretty heavily involved during the development of what is the latest published recommendation, WCAG 2.1, as we call it. And so what is it? It's a pretty extensive document that is the result of lots and lots and lots and lots of arguments and voting and people's opinions being smashed together in public opinion. And so there's a lot that goes into it. It's divided into 4 key principles. And those are, the content needs to be perceivable, it needs to be operable, it needs to be understandable and robust. Pretty basic, but you drill down into that. There's 13 different guidelines and over 60 plus success criteria, which are painstakingly written to try to be as testable as possible with a little ambiguity. Not an easy task. But it's been done and it gets published, and those are the de facto standards that make it into that are pretty well written. So well written that they are pretty much referred to when it comes to disability laws and regulations throughout the globe. The United States refers to them directly in their regulations. So does the UK, the EU, Japan, Korea, Australia. There's probably more. So yeah, everybody looks to WCAG for how to create good content. And then in terms of specifications, the only one that matters really for Home Assistant is what's called ARIA, the Accessible Rich Internet Applications, published by another group in the W3C. And boil it down, that's actually a specification, not a set of guidelines. And it breaks down into providing a set of attributes for markup languages to create accessible applications where HTML might be lacking. So think of complicated widgets and things like that. That's where you need ARIA. So how do you meet that? Well, that's a huge topic that I could go on and on and on and on and about. But really it boils down to taking what you want to do and finding the techniques and published guidelines or published techniques to implement it. So you want to create a really complicated spinner button or combo box, et cetera, et cetera. You go to the ARIA Authoring Practices Guide, and they've got most of it spelled out for you. And if you read the specs, it's pretty easy. Same with WCAG and standard HTML techniques. You go to a success criteria. Each one of those 60 plus success criteria has a list of techniques, all of which documented on their own page with how to test and implement them, usually with good examples as well, that code you can just copy. So in practice, what do you do? So, once you do that, how do you make sure it works? While automated testers can go a long way, there are accessibility checkers and linters, and there are big accessibility firms that make their living on selling those products. But in the end, they can only catch certain things. They can catch, color contrast issues. They can catch missing alternative text and stuff like that, and all these things. But they can't tell you, oh, this alternative text makes sense. You really need human testing for nearly all of the success criteria. So that, these checkers can tell you if something's missing. I mean, don't get me wrong; they're a good first defense, but you need people to test. So that's usually that ends up being people with disabilities that test and file issues. But more and more developers are encouraged to, try it. Try it, especially with a screen reader. Just with a keyboard and a screen reader, and that's why that's my lone bullet down there. Is you can really solve a lot of just simple accessibility issues by just making sure if I hit tab and go through my little widget, does it work? Does it make sense? Is focus if I hit the down, if I hit this key and that key, does it make sense? So if I switch gears, try and stay within my time here, let's talk about home assistant, or not home assistant, but home automation in general and accessibility. And why am I so passionate about this when it comes to home assistant? Well, it's pretty simple. Most people, when they think of home automation, I'm sure lots of people can get really passionate about it as well. But at the end of the day, it's convenience and it saves you time. And that's what most people do. Otherwise, they can go back to the old way of doing things. But for people with disabilities, it's much, much more than that. It can involve just taking something that you just couldn't do before because the products aren't made for you and giving you independence. And that's a huge deal. And I personally think that Home Assistant has the ability to kind of dominate that market because of just it by its very nature. It's free and open source, which means you're not complicating things with extra costs, extra proprietary things. You got to deal with this company and that company. It makes a difference. Being able to integrate so many brands under one roof, and the key term there being is one accessible roof. Because otherwise I have to do this app and that app and this app and that app for each of my little devices, and chances are 90% of them or 50% of them or whatever it is, I've got accessibility issues with. But if I can set that up once and go to Home Assistant, my life is a lot easier. Excuse me. So let me give you I think, a lot of this can just be demonstrated with just a few simple examples, considering different people with different types of disabilities. So take someone who's blind and visually impaired. I personally can attest to not being able to access nearly all visual interfaces when it comes to appliances, thermostats, etc. So I basically have two choices. I can look for the ones with physical buttons, or create them myself with lots of tactile markers and stuff like that. That only gets me so far. And also limits my choices when I go out and buy something. Instead, I can get the smart product, or I can get the Z-Wave product, etc. And I can hook it up to Home Assistant. And as long as that interface is accessible, my life is now independent when it comes to those devices. Take someone with a hearing disability. Deaf and hard of hearing people use light and vibration as notifications when it comes to things that we take for granted as sound. Doorbells, even just doors opening, appliance timers, etc., wake up alarms, etc. Being able, instead of having to go out and buy a expensive, complicated device, their switch, their smart switch, their Z-Wave switch can just be automated, and they can do these things with Home Assistant and probably better, much better than the more expensive product that they would otherwise have to buy. People with motor disabilities, so think Parkinson's, muscular dystrophy, et cetera, or just tremors, the physical tasks like opening the shades, locking the doors, all types of things can just be automated. And they don't have to have somebody come over and help them out with those things. It's just so independent. And then people with cognitive disabilities, the gamut of common cognitive disabilities is so wide. The best I can say here is that, cognitive disabilities generally increase, your people with cognitive disabilities generally just need a reduction in cognitive load. And automation, just by its very nature, does that. So, I mean, this list can go on and on and on, but in the end, it only works if you can set it up accessibly yourself, and then you can operate it accessibly yourself. So, which brings me to, everything's moving to the front end in Home Assistant, obviously. The YAML was actually a great accessibility for, especially for people who use keyboards and people who are visually impaired, because it's just a text editor, and it's easy to find an accessible text editor. As we move towards the front end, the understanding for lots of other disabilities goes up, but we got to make sure those things are accessible. So like I said, I've been trying to do my part, creating issues and then solving those issues through pull requests. So this is just a couple highlights of what I've worked on and am still working on. Excuse me. So probably one of the first things that just annoyed the heck out of me was I couldn't use the mobile app. And this was well documented. There was a whole bunch of issues on it, and couldn't solve it, and traced it down to a issue with Polymer, which I would love to see completely replaced in Home Assistant. There's lots of stuff going on in the back end, so it was turned out just to be turning off some weird setting that was getting rid of clicks. It was taking a click when you had a screen reader on and just throwing it away. So you really just couldn't use the mobile app at all. There's still one hangover issue left from that, but now I can open my mobile app and use it, which is tremendously helpful, obviously. Some other things I've been working on is just general keyboard management for dialogues. Big annoyance for keyboard users is, focus management. Where does the focus go? Does it go to the right spot? So when you open a dialogue, you expect it to move into the dialogue. And when you close a dialogue, you expect it to move back where you were. So getting that to work was a fairly big task, and I'm still working on a lot of dialogues, because there's lots and lots of dialogues in Home Assistant. Let's see, what else? Unlabeled buttons have been a long-standing issue. This has come a long way. There's probably the most commented issue, I think, on the front end is labeled buttons, because there were so many of them. A lot of that has been worked out, but I've been working on ways to try to completely eliminate that, because probably the biggest reason I see that they're unlabeled is that there's a translation key that is either incorrectly typed, or it's missing, or it was moved. And I'm trying to basically completely eliminate that possibility, which is a big task. But I've made significant progress there. I mentioned, I don't think I have it in the bullet, but one thing I worked on lately is just getting browser autofill to work, which is a big convenience for lots of people, but especially for people with cognitive disabilities that have issues transcribing or even copying and pasting. So those autofill features are very, very helpful. Let's see. So I started creating a slide on future issues and decided it was way too complicated. and it would just highlight my personal preferences, which may not be anyone else's. So I thought I would just go to what I've created. Paulus was nice enough to give me access to the projects, and I created a GitHub project where I could organize all the accessibility issues. So if you go to basically go to the front end, go to the projects. Excuse me, I'm trying to navigate. So if I go to the backlog here, I've got it organized where a lot of these issues are filed issues where you can read the full report. I tried to break it down and organize it into, we talked about WCAG, and WCAG has 3 different conformance levels. There's A, AA, and AAA. AA is sort of the standard that everybody points to as very achievable accessibility. A is a little bit, sort of the basic level. And AAA is not usually recommended because some of it can be difficult to get to. And I sort of document these in terms of, which success criteria you're violating so that you can go and read about and handle it. But I have probably 30 plus issues in this backlog. I'm sure that there's more because I've only been able to evaluate, what I use the most. I haven't done a full review, which leads me to say that, the best thing that I can do is ask for help. Obviously, developers can help solve these issues, and I'm happy to help. Happy to point you in the right direction, review it. I'm sure other people could do that as well. There are a lot of what I would call annoyance issues. It should work this way, but you kind of do trial and error and get around it. But then there are some that are just, it just doesn't work. You can't use it. So for example, the only way to select a location is to point and click on a map right now. And I just can't use that. So I have to use YAML. The date picker right now is very inaccessible. We could swap that out with a new component, etc. Anyway, lots of ways to solve it. Some of these are very easy to solve. Some of them are probably pretty intense, but we'll get there. I know I'm going to keep working on it, and I hope any developer that would be interested in it or has some motivation for it would jump in, help file issues, comment on them, take one up if you want. Again, I am happy to help. Ping me, mention me at StevRep, and I'm happy to help. And I think that's all I have, Paulus. Any questions?
Hey, Steve. No questions here. I think, you're doing an amazing job. And I think that if you look at like Home Assistant, right, we try to get more accessible, but for sure with your contributions, make sure that everything added from this point is definitely accessible. I remember when I was adding like the automation, collapsing stuff, then I really heard like, it was like, you were like, well, you put this button inside this other button, so that cannot work, right? And so that's also how we all learn, right? And so, yeah, it gets definitely better. It's nice.
Yeah, and I the only thing I can add to that is to say catching issues then, like Paul submitted something and I reviewed it, said, do this, do that. And he modified it pretty quickly right away. He was already in the zone to do it. So things get done a lot easier, a lot quicker, a lot more efficient that way. So yeah, it's always better to start with something accessible rather than try to fix it afterwards.
So yeah, once again, thank you for all these efforts, and also thank you for this presentation, right? To like tell all our community about what everything. There was already one commenter that said that Rod Alkidonis, he says, let's team up and maybe we can like identify more issues and help fix them. So I hope he reaches out. All right, I think it's time for the next speaker. Thank you again, Steve. Have a good afternoon. And then we're now having Jesse. Oh, I hear that Ha! I'm
Hello.
actually hearing an echo.
From me?
No, not from you, it's from me. I think somewhere in the tech here. But, yes, so Jesse and I are going to talk about two topics, Bluetooth and ESPHome. The reason we're combining this is because Bluetooth has been powered by ESPHome, and it's such intertwined actually that we should just kind of talk about it together. And I think the first step is going to be kind of explain what ESPHome is, right? Because, yeah.
Yeah. So, hello, I'm Jesse. I work full-time on ESPHome, trying to, improve it for everybody. ESPHome is software, firmware for microcontrollers. Basically, myself and others as developers of ESPHome, we write all of the code so that when it comes time for you, the user, to program this microcontroller, all you have to do is actually write some configuration in YAML, and we take care of all of the rest of it for you, including compiling, flashing, and even setting up an API server so that Home Assistant can then connect to your device and basically show you all of your sensor data, switches that you may have. There's no real limit to what ESPHome can do with time.
Yeah, I think the greatest part is that people don't have to know how to program, right? They just write some YAML, they say, I have a sensor here, and boom, it compiles the software, installs it for you, you're good to go.
Yeah. It's definitely, made the barrier to get into microcontrollers way lower. Like you just, it's ground level.
And so one of the things that for us really allows for ESPHome is that we can actually put advanced features in an ESPHome device and allow users to install this from their browser. So we can allow people to create devices in their home that they previously didn't have to unlock certain functionalities. And this kind of brings us to Bluetooth, because this year we added Bluetooth. And I'm just going to, I hear a lot of echo of myself, so I'm just going to take this one out. I don't really hear you, Jesse, but I'll put it back in a bit. Because for a Home Assistant, Bluetooth wasn't really a thing for Home Assistant. And the reason for that is that the Bluetooth range is kind of short. So any Bluetooth device is usually meant to be connected to your phone. But your phone, the range, 5 meters, and you put your Home Assistant somewhere in the cellar of your house, somewhere far away, it can definitely not reach many Bluetooth devices. So what started happening is that basically Bluetooth in the Home Assistant sucked. And then we kind of came up with a genius idea, because more and more ESP32 devices started to be launched. And ESP32 is a microcontroller, it works with ESPHome, and it has Wi-Fi and it has Bluetooth. And well, the Bluetooth part wasn't really used. We did see some more ESPHome integrations to talk to Bluetooth devices and forward it back into Home Assistant. But that wasn't enough, right? So we really this year decided we want to take Bluetooth to the next level. And so we decided to add Bluetooth proxies to ESPHome. And so with this feature, Home Assistant can connect through ESPHome and talk to Bluetooth devices in your home. And it looks a bit like this. And we kind of saw earlier this stream, we talked about thread border routers. And this is exactly the same, right? So you have devices that go over Wi-Fi, and the last mile, whatever, it goes over Bluetooth. And so, yeah, Jesse, talk a bit about it. Well, how does it work?
Yeah, so all of these Bluetooth sensors, right? They will some of them will advertise their sensor values directly out. And so any device within range can just pick up the temperature from them. And so what the Bluetooth proxy in ESPHome does is takes those advertisements and just forwards them to Home Assistant. Home Assistant will then decode that packet. It will split it up, figure out what sort of device it comes from, and forward that to the correct integration. If you don't have it set up, then it shows up as a newly discovered device under the relevant integration, which is quite cool. So yeah, created that. And then there are other devices like lights that require a like the communication to go back the other way. And so what we did there is upgrade the Bluetooth proxy to allow active connections, and this allows Home Assistant to then send a command through the ESPHome device to that light bulb or that light or switch or whatever, anything basically. And yeah, it's sort of a very transparent process through ESPHome. It doesn't really care what Home Assistant wants to do. It will just do it. Hence the name proxy, sort of thing.
Right. I mean, the fact that it's a proxy is actually the most powerful part, right? Because you don't have to update your ESPHome Bluetooth proxy.
Exactly.
You update Home Assistant.
Yeah. Up until now, you would have to. So you could do this sort of stuff in ESPHome beforehand, but if you wanted to create a new device, you would have to update your YAML, create a new Bluetooth client, create all of the switches, the sensors, and everything in YAML, recompile, upload to ESPHome, and it will do it. But now it just comes straight from Home Assistant. When Home Assistant gets all of these new devices, if it's available, and Home Assistant sees an advertisement from a new device or a device that you already have that is now newly supported, it just shows up. You just configure it and it works. So
my favorite new supported device that was just added, Oral-B toothbrushes. So if you have an Oral-B Bluetooth toothbrush, and it's kind of the higher end show, you can now see when you're brushing, how many sectors you have brushed, if you have brushed, like how long you have brushed. So it's great. For example, you can trigger your midnight routine when you start brushing your teeth, or maybe you can remind your kids when they accidentally forget to brush their teeth. And so, yeah, this all works. So, just, if you had a Bluetooth proxy before, you update Home Assistant, you have it now. But when it comes to Bluetooth proxies, we released this now a couple of months ago. We've been iterating on it. There's a cool new feature in the next release, right, Jesse?
Which one's that?
The 3 connections, I thought.
The multiple connections. Yes. So, it's gone in 3 major stages, I guess. The first was the proxy itself, which was passive packets, just the advertisements, so just sensors, really. Then the next release, I added the active connection, so you could control a device. And now I went back through and sort of rewrote some of the code. And now ESPHome supports up to 3 different connections. So having one ESP device per Bluetooth device was a bit sort of tricky, I guess, because you could have tens of them in your house. So now it's goes up to 3. The limit is set by the Arduino framework. So there's not a lot we can do to control that. If in the future we might be able to make it more, but I guess going above 3 from this tiny little microcontroller, you're probably going to run into issues. Right. Trying to have it, maintaining 3 connections open at once, or more than 3 anyway. A lot of the integrations will close the connection when they're not being used. So you don't have to specifically have 1 per 3 devices. You could have more Bluetooth devices out there, but it just means that it can control them more like at once. Like some of the lights I have here, they'll keep their connection open permanently. So that takes up a slot 24/7. Which is good for the users, for you guys, because it means that your light is always available to control in Home Assistant. You don't have to wait. There's no delays. It just works as if it was, because it's always connected, which is really good.
So a lot of this Bluetooth stuff on the Home Assistant side has been done by Bidraco, which Frank mentioned earlier has also done a lot of the performance stuff. And Bidraco has actually been working on the next cool feature for Bluetooth proxies. And that is that now Shelly devices can become Bluetooth proxies. So any ESP32 based Shelly device will be able to receive Bluetooth packets and forward it to Home Assistant. So receiving, again, this is not controlling, so you cannot control your lights through Shelly. Maybe that will come, it's not clear, but you will be able to receive, for example, your toothbrush data or your barbecue thermometer or all these kind of things. So that is really awesome. So we had Bluetooth proxies and people had installed them on an ESP32 device, but then you have a device that just one thing. Like, it would be nice if it could do multiple things. So with Shellys, you already use a Shelly as a relay behind a switch, and now it can forward data too. So that's awesome.
Yeah. definitely
And
needs
then
to
stick.
be
Oh, sorry.
these existing consumer devices that
Right.
people have. You
And
just
we
bit of
hope to
software
see
upgrade.
Bluetooth proxies, of course, land in more devices, right? Like if we can kind of like integrate with the API, we will be able to hook it into Home Assistant.
Yeah.
Now, on this topic of Bluetooth, there's another thing that we released this year, which is ESPHome. ESPHome is an open API that we released that, or actually Ernst Klamer released, and we supported him, and it's a protocol that anyone can implement to broadcast discovery data over Bluetooth and get it into Home Assistant or any platform that implements it. And we released version 1, and we got actually in touch with Shelly about like the Bluetooth proxies, and we're kind of like, they were like, well, you could actually do a bit better. And together with them, we worked on version 2 of ESPHome that got released this week. And what's so cool about version 2 is that we actually, Shelly is part of the Bluetooth Alliance and has registered ESPHome to make it be an official service. So thanks to Shelly, now it's actually, you can use a Bluetooth logo on your box if you make a product with ESPHome. And they have granted the license for anyone to use this without any cost associated. So if you haven't checked ESPHome and you're making DIY sensors with Bluetooth, definitely check it out. All the docs are already up to date.
Yeah, that's cool.
Media players. You want to talk about this one, Jesse?
Yeah, so where do I start? I guess we had another sort of crazy idea, right? That perhaps ESPHome devices can be hooked up to speakers and play sounds. There were a few components in ESPHome to play sounds from like the SD cards and do some beeping. But we had an idea. Maybe we can actually play a full-on MP3 streamed from Home Assistant or even from a cloud service or wherever out through the speakers. The main use case, I guess, we had for some of the smaller speakers is a lot of text-to-speech. Makes it really easy to put a little text-to-speech speaker around the house. But you can get things like the Lux Muse box, which is a full-on speaker, and actually play full-on like streaming music via ESPHome.
Yeah. Nah, it's been really cool, and especially if you combine it with Music Assistant, it's the project Marcel released to make music easier and like manage from Home Assistant in a single stream. You can actually get like a whole music system based on ESPHome.
Whole home audio with room control and everything, basically.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. And so the next thing for ESPHome that we have in mind is actually something that Jesse has been working on for the last couple of months. And basically we were working on it before it got launched. Like we got early access, but we weren't able to finish in time. Is support for Raspberry Pi Pico. So
Yes.
Raspberry Pi Pico is not your normal Raspberry Pi. It's the Pico version. It's a smaller one. It's a microcontroller. So it's like an ESP, but it's by Raspberry Pi. It has, the new version is Raspberry Pi Pico W. And this is actually has Wi-Fi. And because there's Wi-Fi, it's a microcontroller, you can install things on it. It's ESPHome territory, right? So yeah, what can you say about it, Jesse?
Yeah. So where do I start for this one? I just, one day I just went down to the shop and picked up a regular Pico without the Wi-Fi, and I just decided maybe I can get ESPHome working on this. Let's give it a go. And I did that, and I actually got it running over the first weekend, which I was amazed how easy it was. And from then, it just sort of sat there as an open PR for a while, and I never really came back to it. I had all these other amazing features we were working on. And then, Raspberry Pi and Jeff Gerling approached us and said, perhaps there's a new one coming out. Perhaps we can get it going again and get ESPHome completely supported. And so I pulled it back out and got some Pico Ws, and pretty much have been going through up until this release. So the next ESPHome release, which comes out during the week in a couple of days, will have pretty much for almost full support, I guess, what I could say for the ESPHome features. There are a few things that aren't working yet, and I still need to work on them. things that I don't have that I can't test. But the majority of ESPHome's features do work. So you can, build out some projects now with the Pico W, which is really cool.
You know what I think is really cool about this is not just, of course, that it works. That's great, but the way Raspberry Pi is in the market is completely different than ESP32. So people will get a Raspberry Pi Pico W without actually knowing what they're going to use it for. Maybe they'll give it to somebody, or you get it free with a magazine, or it's like a freebie. Or so if you have a Pico W somehow, and you start Googling, you start searching, like, can I do with it? And then you find ESPHome, and it's probably one of the easiest ways to get something going and integrate it in like part of a smart home. So I'm really stoked to see that, like, we're gonna get a new audience out of this that will be able to use ESPHome and, well, basically also get their entry into the open home.
Yeah, it's just making it another step easier for people. The other options for programming a Pico is writing an Arduino C++ sketch, or using MicroPython, which are both programming in a sense. So ESPHome brings the configuration to the Pico and makes it just that much easier.
Right. So we're all super stoked about this.
Yeah.
Something else that we're stoked about this, and it is. I'm going to thank you, Jesse, so we can move on to our next speaker, because something else we're very interested in, and we kind of got to roll to the next one, is voice. So I want to thank you, Jesse, and everybody will see you around the internet, on the ESPHome forums, community.
See ya.
All right. Hi, Mike.
Hello. How you doing?
Very good. We're having a great stream here. Mm-hmm. Thank you for joining us or joining us, I have to say, sorry. Where are you calling from?
From Iowa, the state of corn.
Awesome. Great. Well, welcome to the State of the Open Home. We invited you because you've been very passionate about voice. You've been working on various voice projects over the year. The big one being Raspberry. You've really try to get all the open source tools accessible under one roof, make it a single way of configuring, make it very easy and accessible to use voice. And well, basically, we wanted to, we've been dabbling with voice. Of course, we had Stanford last year, we had Stanford before, the year before too. And so we've been trying to get something going. And well, this year is like, the floor is yours, and show us what you've got.
All right, great. Can we see my slides yet? There they are. Hi, so I'm Mike Hansen. I'm going to talk a bit about Raspberry and voice in the open home. In case anyone wonders, the Raspberry logo is supposed to be a raven, but I am not a great artist. I am a doctor, though not terribly the useful kind. My PhD is in computer science and cognitive science, though I'd say I like to play a computational linguist on TV. I'll talk a little bit about that. Let me jump over here. There. So I think kind of some of the motivation for Raspberry can be described a bit by this little cartoon. Again, not a great artist, but I thought a lot of people use Raspberry for home automation, specifically with Home Assistant. And I thought this kind of scenario was a bit ridiculous, right? If you're, there really is no cloud, right? There's other people's computers. And the argument in the past was that you needed other people's computers because they were faster than yours to do things like voice, AI stuff. And I just don't think that's true anymore. I don't think for a lot of things that people use home automation for, you need advanced general purpose AI. I tell people, you don't need an airplane to go to the grocery store. If you're just doing kind of fairly pedestrian things with it, turning on lights, running Home Assistant automations, asking about certain sensors and things like that. You don't need a general purpose AI that you can ask, questions about philosophy to. And the other side of this, I really enjoyed Steve's talk about accessibility. For some people, what people use Raspberry for is being able to customize every aspect of the way you talk to your voice assistant. So they can change words and pronunciations to exactly what they want. So they can make the software work for them rather than having to discover and figure out, okay, how am I supposed to say this, and kind of contort how they speak for the computer. And I think that's important. Additionally, since Raspberry can work fully offline, you have the durability aspect. So if the internet goes out, if you're somebody who has disabilities, you don't lose all of your smart home abilities over voice. So Raspberry covers a number of general parts of a voice assistant. All of these are important in their own right, and there are different tools in Raspberry for each of them. I wouldn't say that we've solved, open source has solved all of these pieces. I think wake word detection, for example, needs a lot of work still on the open source side. But speech to text, I think, is the big one where it's very difficult to get it right. And this is usually the one where people jump out to a cloud service like Google or something. And so what Raspberry's trade-offs, you can go out to a cloud service if you want, that's your choice. But what you can also do is run it local. And you kind of have had two ways of doing it. Either I call it open domain or closed. Now the open is you can say just about anything. This is limited by how the model was trained initially, but you can usually say just about anything to it. It's usually a bit slower and a little less accurate if you're saying unusual things. And then you have the closed domain. This is where you kind of tell Raspberry in a nutshell, these are all the things I want to be able to say, and it will train a special speech-to-text model just for that. And this is usually way more accurate, way faster, but limited. So there's a trade-off. Something that's been in beta for a while and I'm working on now is trying to combine these approaches where the closed domain kind of knows what it doesn't know and can say, this is outside what I know, and then you can kind of fall over to the open domain. So these are things I'm working on now. I'd say Raspberry's core feature is being able to customize. You write these sentence templates. This is if you choose the closed domain. And then what you can do is effectively get some kind of structured response out of Raspberry. And so usually this comes out as JSON. And you kind of say, these are the different intents that I want. This is how I want to say them. And you can tag the pieces of your sentences and say, this is the name of a light. This is, the state of that light, on or off, etc. And then you can ship that event that comes out, that structured response, off to some handler. And a lot of people ship that off to Home Assistant as an event or directly as an intent. I'll talk a little later. I'm trying to make that easier with something called Raspberry Junior. But these can also go out to other things like OpenHab and can't remember the other one that people are using. But yeah, these they can go just about anywhere, and you can do whatever you want. And this is all can happen locally. So the way this usually works is you install Raspberry either as a Home Assistant add-on or as just a regular Docker container or something, and you access the web interface. And then you can kind of have your command center where you can decide what services you want to run and test things out. I won't go into any detail here, but this is kind of the idea where you come here and you can kind of customize exactly how you want Raspberry to run. And the way you usually do this is, depending on what hardware you have, you can kind of mix and match different open source services here. So they've been brought under one umbrella, and I'm hoping to keep adding more and more. For example, a big requested one recently has been Whisper for speech to text. And so you can mix and match things that are appropriate for whatever hardware you have, and you can run these on different devices. And in fact, one of the configurations of Raspberry is to have a base station where you run the more CPU or GPU intensive services. And then you have a number of satellite devices that are very small, and they run usually just a microphone and a speaker and often wake word detection, though you can run just a microphone that's always streaming data to the base station. And so there you can kind of have different speakers configured for different zones in your house. And we even have an option where you can group them. So if multiple satellites wake up at the same time, the first one that woke up will be the one that kind of handles things instead of both of them trying to. So kind of some arguments for why I think people should go with Raspberry. Besides it's open source and MIT license, and it's highly customizable. So you can change just about anything, like I said, including like down to the level of word pronunciations. One of my favorite community projects has been, they call it the Hogwarts Assistant, and they replaced all of the sentences in Raspberry with Hogwarts or Harry Potter spells. So they, even the wake word, and so they'd say, you know, hey Hogwarts, and give a spell, and the light would turn on and off. And I thought that was really cool. Of course, it can function fully offline. So this is if you pick particular sets of services, you can do it without an internet connection. And then, importantly, it's private, so it hits another one of those pieces of the open home, where all data is kept locally. And I put this together. I often get people who, for the privacy part, they give me kind of the argument of, well, you know, I've got nothing to hide. What does it matter that my data is kept private? And over the years, I've been giving this argument more to people that, you know, if you're like most people, you have a provider like Google or Apple, and you have so many things that are with that one provider. You might have, you know, your email, your media, your pictures, you know, your home automation stuff, all sorts of things with this one company. And as you see more and more, they're using algorithms to moderate and to check things. They could far outstrip their human resources on these things. And the false positives are starting to pop up, right? And so people are getting their accounts, you know, banned. And this is something that wouldn't have mattered back in 2000, you know, is life-changing now in 2022. To if you lost your, you know, your Google or your Apple account, that could mean a lot of consequences for you. And so if you're, you know, for a smart speaker, say you put that in your house and you have your voice going out to that company 24 hours a day, well, that's a lot of opportunities for false positives. So I feel like that's a little less tinfoil hat and more kind of practical advice for people for privacy. Let's see. So last slide here. So I got I guess Raspberry originally started as actually a Raspberry Pi camp project for the kids. I did a thing for 10th graders back in 2017, and it's just ramped up from there, and it's grown into something that I'm very passionate about, and started off as a Home Assistant custom component actually. And then when Snips got bought, they were a open source voice assistant. I took the protocol that they had developed and integrated that into Raspberry so that a lot of the Snips add-ons would still work. And then as we've gone over time, I've again tried to use more of the computational linguist stuff that I've enjoyed, and extended Raspberry to support 16 human languages. In fact, if you see the computer behind me, I've got Danish and Norwegian voices for text-to-speech training right now. And soon I'll be starting a German voice. Thorsten Mueller just released his new voice corpus, so thank you very much, Thorsten, for that. So 2022, I put together something with talking to Paulus with called Raspberry Junior that basically takes certain pieces of Raspberry and puts them in as a Home Assistant add-on that auto-configures everything for you. So currently not really customizable. Currently English only, and what that lets you do is basically I think was it Lucas from Everything Smart Home had done a video on this. So it lets you basically just have a voice assistant part for your Home Assistant that auto discovers and devices and has pre-programmed sentences for everything. So, you know, turn on the light, turn off the light, etc. And it has a limited number of domains it supports and everything, but it's kind of the start of this idea of an out-of-the-box experience that you can just press go and you can have a local offline private voice assistant. And with that, that's my last slide. So I'll have Paulus come back.
Awesome. That was great.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think it'd be great to announce that starting like 2 weeks from now, Mike is going to join Nabu Casa.
That's right.
And we're planning to do like the year of the voice next year. So we had like streamlining experiences last year, making it easier before. And you know, when you think of a smart home, there's like four things: automations, dashboard, history, and voice. And when you look at the first three, we do a great job. But voice, it's still too difficult. Even like with the work Mike and I did, or mainly Mike, and I helped a bit, we gave up the hints. With Raspberry Junior, it's still too difficult to get something going that is reliable and works good enough. So what we're trying to achieve next year is really we're not going to compete with Google and Amazon that level, but it's just like, can we get something in the homes of users that will be good enough? And maybe that is just a basic voice assistant, maybe we'll just work with lights and whatever. But one of our main focus points is going to be, it's not just English, right? You just saw Raspberry. Danish is training right there in the colored rainbow box. And and so, yeah, we want to have as many voices, and I think that like with the Home Assistant community behind us and building an infrastructure where people can easily contribute voices, train like more voices, we should be able to just get many voices in there. The basic subset just to get basic IoT going, maybe some other voice domains that like besides IoT, things we see are popular are shopping list and maybe timers. So if that just works, and then the many language, I think a lot of people will be very happy. So that's going to be our goal for next year.
Yeah, I think for people, if they're wanting something, some action they can take right away, if you contribute to Mozilla's Common Voice dataset, that's something I pull from for speech to text. And for text to speech, you have LibriVox, which is something where you can go read an audiobook basically for people. And those, if you have good recording conditions, I can use that for text-to-speech voice. So as people do these, make these great contributions in different languages, I can come in, and I still need help from people who are native speakers because I only speak English, and so it's a great experience for me and I'm happy to be able to share that with people.
Right. So yeah, this is going to be great. So definitely keep an eye on what we're doing. If you want to stay in the loop of the voice, I think we might just do like a dedicated voice update, or maybe kind of like office hours, this kind of thing. We kind of have to see. We're going to start in 2 weeks with kind of laying out the framework, how we want to lay this out. But definitely subscribe to the Building the Open Home newsletter, follow Home Assistant updates, because we're definitely going to make it as easy as possible for people that are already in our ecosystem. And of course, if you want to support our Year of the Voice, definitely subscribe to Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa, because that pays Mike, pays Frank, pays Bram, all the other people you saw today, and so it's going to be great.
Very excited.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike. I'll talk to you in a couple of weeks, and wish you a great next of your day.
All right. Thank you.
Great. So that was actually all the speakers we had for today. I can finally take this annoying ear out. So I think before we close out, we're going to have two things. I want to first, of course, thank all our sponsors and all the people that have worked on Home Assistant, like 13,500 people that has been registered by GitHub. But of course, our community is a lot bigger. We have people on the forums, people on Discord helping out, these kind of things. So we thank you to all, whoever you are. There's too many to name. Thank you to the 13,500 people that have contributed to Home Assistant one way or the other. Let's, continue this next year. Let's keep this momentum. Let's, maybe not as fast, like it can be sometimes a bit tiring for the people that run the core chores of Home Assistant, do all the releases and go through the issues. But it's going to be great. I think voice is going to be great. Then I want to just take a quick second just to thank our sponsors. These are the companies that have great features for open source projects that support us. The big one is GitHub, of course. They host Home Assistant source code. They run all the builds are being powered by GitHub. Whenever you get a new update for your operating system, Home Assistant Core, it's all done by GitHub. So huge thanks to them. We couldn't do it without them. That's really great. Then, of course, Netlify, they built the Home Assistant website, and every PR is checked by them. And we don't have one website. We have our data science portal and whatnot. There's 15 websites or something that Netlify is responsible for. That's great. Discord is, of course, great because, they host our chat. We have 100,000 people in that server. So that's not a small feat. And, they keep releasing actually great features for us now for community management. Cloudflare also great sponsor because, well, a lot of people watching our reading a documentation, and it's causing a lot of traffic. So Cloudflare is doing a great job. And Localize. Localize is what we use for our translations. So I think we have like 90 different languages in Home Assistant, and our translators are always logging in, making sure all the strings are up to date, verifying them, and that's been, it just works great. So thank you to all our sponsors. We're now going to have like a quick Q&A because there's been some questions coming in during the stream, and we actually have some more time than we thought we would have, so which is great. So I want to invite Frank and Pascal to join me, and let's do this.
Let's do it.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Right?
Yeah.
Welcome back. So great.
So,
If there are questions,
are there questions?
drop it in the chat, and we can like bring them up. and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about
Do
it.
we have like a question to prime it off? Should we like, will it matter?
I believe that question was there. No, at this point, everybody's exciting for years of voice, actually.
Voice, yes.
Which looks really great. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Me too. I think that would be a great feature.
And I hope, we can get Swiss German in and like things like this.
Yeah, maybe.
And,
Let's start with Germans.
Right. I think, when we look at voice, there's a lot of things available, but it's just difficult to get like, how do you get like hot word detection, voice isolation, speech to text, these 3 steps are the hardest part. So
Yeah.
I actually I came up with a shortcut, and not everybody agrees with this shortcut, but I want to start using landline phones, because if you pick up a landline phone, okay, it's not always listening, but the moment you pick up the phone, that's instead of hot word detection, so we can skip that part. Then you talk into the phone, right? So voice isolation is already done because you speak directly into the microphone. You hear exactly what's coming back, and you can just have a conversation. So we can skip the hardest parts of voice and just start working on like all the different speech to text, intent detection.
Right.
I created the many years before Adam.
Right.
Right.
The tech demo. And yeah, I'm really happy to see something's better than.
Well, I think when you created ADA, we did like hot word detection on the Raspberry Pi, and right now what we've seen because the voice assistants from Google and Amazon, a lot of companies have been focusing on this, creating on this. There's a whole business. There's audio processing chips and whatnot. So there's more stuff that you can actually buy and put like hardware based in a device if you want to use it.
So I really believe we can do it. So
I think so too. So I don't know if a year is enough, by the way, but it's just that like it's going to be our main focus.
It's
and
not
then after
like
it's
streamlining
there.
is ending either, right?
No,
like,
yeah, of
we're
course.
still going to continue with streamlining, and we're continuing to making things easier.
make it easier, streamline.
And now,
voice.
voice is a new focus,
Right.
so that's kind of cool. Meanwhile, questions are dropping in, so
Cool.
that's good. So one that's coming up a couple of times is, I will highlight it, any update on the Sky Connect?
Yes, so we did. What happened, and it's kind of a silly thing, is that we have an update on the Sky Connect. So it is being produced right now, and the first ones are going to ship out in 2 days.
Really?
So, or like to our distributors. That's the plan, and then from there on to people. Now I haven't checked my email last week, so maybe there's a small delay in there, but it's definitely this month. What has happened is that we did our workshop with Matter presentation in June, and we announced the Sky Connect, and people could get on the waiting list, and there's like 10,000 people on this waiting list or something. And then we got Sky Connect with distributors, and then we just forgot to email the mailing list, and now it's sold out. So, it was like we made like 8,000 pieces, and then we didn't do any marketing. Like it was on the front page of the website, and I guess we mentioned in the newsletter, but like not that many people have saw it, but I guess enough that it was sold out.
It was so fast sold out.
Yeah, and so we're working on the second batch. Second batch coming in January, February, and the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to email our the people on the waiting list.
If they already have one.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's possible to have, in the end, everyone get one, which
for sure.
one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go everywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Just
do it.
I'm just going to pick some because there are quite a few, and if you still want to add something, go ahead. Can we have update entities for ESPHome devices?
I hope so. I think we discussed this yesterday. Maybe not. Well, somewhere this week I discussed this because I kind of want to have a closer integration between Home Assistant and the ESPHome dashboard. My main pet peeve right now is that ESPHome automatically adds an encryption key, and then you go to Home Assistant and you're like, ask for your encryption key, but you don't actually know it because everything was automated for you.
Yeah.
And so Home Assistant could just talk to ESPHome, ask for the encryption key, and I think update entities are on the next step once we have this integration going.
Would also make adding the devices then easier, right?
Yeah,
You
we
just
just
pop
do
up,
it.
configure, and done.
Yeah.
Instead of like exchanging or finding the keys.
We could even, well, for ESPHome, we could even maybe make a button, just add to Home Assistant.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you'd even not need the add-on for getting the ESPHome device running in your Home Assistant.
Right. The moment you go through the wizard, it will just be added to your Home Assistant. So I think we can do better there, and that's just the ESPHome dashboard is like somewhere on the to-do list. It's kind of been flow. Like
I mean,
from time to time, I dedicate like a week or two, and then like push it out a bunch. But
it's a bit of work because the update have to be compiled and
Yes.
all that together. So it's maybe not that easy, but it's something that is on the list.
yeah,
Definitely. So this one I'm going to highlight because it's in a lot of places. Like it has been asked so many freaking times. It's the highest voted thing on the forums and also the biggest what the heck, which you haven't addressed yet.
uh-oh.
Yeah. Automations in folders, question mark?
Ooh.
Yeah.
You know, I think every time this comes up, what I say is like, well, we have automations in areas, and you
Yeah.
go to your area and you get your folder. And I think it's just not enough, and I admit that. And I think that we can do, I don't know if folders is the right thing, because then people are going to have subfolders or subfolders. I know you've been playing.
Yeah, we have been discussing this actually
Yeah.
internally and with the team and with core members a lot. And we don't know what the right solution is. Some people want like folders, some other people want like labeling stuff or tags or like, I don't know, custom things. So we're not sure where it's heading, but we do want to solve it. So yes,
It's coming one way or the other.
One way or the other, we're going to have that
Yeah.
what the heck solved someday.
I think
That's
the
somewhere.
challenge is that like if we go with the folder direction, then we're stuck with folders, right? Like you cannot
we
really
have to
go.
apply it on other things probably too, right?
Right. Yeah. Then we're foldering scripts and blueprints and
There we go.
tags.
It's not just automation, and if we have some things in, you cannot get the right of it. So we have to test it, and we have to be sure
Yeah.
it's fit for all the other parts.
And Matthias, of course, for
Right.
the UX.
That's
Yes.
UX work, yeah.
We have a job to do there. Interesting. What else? Are we going to have a conference tour?
A conference tour.
A conference tour.
I mean, like people have just like meetups where we talk to people.
I don't know.
I think so. Next year is a big year. Next year, Home Assistant is going to turn 10 years old.
Yeah.
Nabu Casa is going to turn 5 years old, and ESPHome is going to turn 5 years old in January. That one's January, the other two are September. So I feel like we should have a big party. We were talking about it yesterday. Maybe we should do like a 2-day conference kind of thing. The big problem is that like we don't want to organize that.
No.
Or like the thing is like, well, no,
It's a lot of work,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a lot of work. I mean, I would even go as far as saying we cannot organize that. Like we don't have the capacity. Like even getting an event together today has been a lot of work for a lot of people. So 2 years ago we had speakers, like a ton of
Yeah.
speakers. That was too much, and so
That was exhausting. This is actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
The setting is here really, really cool.
yeah.
There are a lot of people behind the camera.
Yeah. So if you go on the
Are not
Twitter,
even.
then you probably will see a couple
Backstage,
of backstage shots, which is it's really
Yeah.
cute here. It's a nice
So-
place as well.
Yeah, no, if we want to do this, we would have to like talk to an eventing company that would organize it. We'll be asking for ticket fees to cover that company and like
security teams.
yeah, I mean
food
it's
stands. I mean,
yeah,
that's
t-shirts and it's a lot of work.
It's really and
Yeah.
expensive.
Yes,
Drag and drop.
drag and drop. Well, it's coming.
Yes,
I think
yeah,
they
it's,
didn't
uh,
listen.
yeah.
Paul,
Oh.
no,
Yeah.
it's Paul said it like so. What had happened is that we used to have masonry, right? The way like Lovelace just tried to like put your card so that it always fits. If you're mobile, if you're on desktop, but the problem with that is that when you move cards around, it doesn't always just move up. Maybe it moves left depending on how the masonry is like how you create stone walls, and so it tries to just fill every empty space. And so, but with the new approach, we're going to have sections. Sections are going to probably represent areas. And so within the area, you will be able to drag and drop your entities. But of course, you will be able to create your own sections and then also reorder within that. So I know that in the past, like people have talked about drag and drop and like that didn't happen. But I think now with our new design that we're working on, it will be possible to happen. So yes,
That's
drag
good
and drop
news.
will come.
There was like a little hint in something on Twitter I saw where
Right. Oh yeah, we did a drag and drop
Was hidden
recording.
The meeting, right? That
Yeah.
was leaked. Yeah.
this one I find cool because I sometimes see it, but I think it's a serious question. Do I have to pay any time in the future to use HA locally?
No. What? That,
Yeah. Oh,
No, I mean, Home Assistant is open source, and that's like, you know, everything we've been building that like works locally, runs locally. Like even today, right? If you want to set up Google Assistant locally, your local Google Assistant code is exactly the same as the Nabu Casa code. The only thing that Nabu Casa does, we route it to Google for you. If you set it up locally, Google routes it directly to you. And then you have to maintain it and whatever. But yeah, no, we wouldn't charge for that because that goes directly against the thing we're doing. Because not only do we want to build the open home, privacy, choice, and durability, we want everybody to be able to get to it. So, you know, that also requires people that don't have the financial means. So yeah, putting that behind a subscription, absolutely not.
But we are happy for every subscriber because they support
Right, yeah.
the whole open home because it needs full-time people. It's a lot of work.
It's definitely a lot of work.
man, folded trees. There's a lot of like folders in here.
You get like,
Folders drag and drop. It seems like you guys.
we
are-
covered it all.
We covered it all. Yeah.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, at least drag and drop.
How low is my energy usage now? It's
I mean,
low.
you know, when I talk about the energy dashboard, we did a great job gathering all the information.
Yeah.
We haven't done a great job in giving you hints about what you could improve. So maybe we can tell you what is your base energy usage.
We
Yeah, real
actually
time
didn't
usage.
talk about it at all today, right?
Yes.
Like it's one of those things where just did too much this year, but we did add comparison this year.
Yes,
Yeah,
you can
that's
actually compare to last week or the
Yeah.
last period, right?
Yes, and we did add water recently,
Yes.
which makes you laugh, but we did add it.
We
and
added
it's
water,
actually
yes.
pretty popular. So yeah,
Yeah.
that is kind of nice.
Now it's really cool because I can compare the usage from last year with this year.
Yeah,
and see
right.
We're a year
if
in now,
it-
right?
If it did better now or not.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
But yeah, I feel we can do more there as well, but we just need to.
Yes, some kind of real-time statistic would be nice to see the current usage.
The
at
what,
moment,
yes.
And the
Yeah.
power usage instead of just
usage, yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
Oh, that could be cool. Will Meta devices still work without being connected to the internet?
Yes, I mean, you know, so Matter only talks completely local. Now, if you connect Matter, of course, to a Google device, then Google sends your data to the cloud, and then maybe you cannot connect through Google to connect it anymore, to control it locally if you're not connected to the internet. But Home Assistant will talk fully local to Matter, either over Thread or over Wi-Fi directly, or Ethernet. That's actually also possible. We saw some Ethernet bridges like the IKEA one. And that will just work, that will just keep working. And nobody can lock you out, right? Like,
I mean, it's just a standard. Home Assistant is, of course, local, so it will work local also without the internet.
right.
But yeah, if you use Google Home or Google Assistant, then
It could be, yeah.
they need maybe the cloud,
Yeah.
but not Home Assistant.
I think this will be about it.
That's all.
Awesome.
There are more questions, but a lot of the same. People are mostly reacting at this point to the things we're saying,
Yeah, that's
like
good.
happy for drag and drop and things like that. So that's cool. Yeah,
That will just be next year's conference. It's just drag and dropping like stuff.
no voice.
On voice. But by voice, I mean.
Right. Drag and drop over.
Right. Okay, well, thank you everybody for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, tell your friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we thank some people here? Like,
Oh,
can
yeah, we have
like,
a whole credit slide actually that we're.
Do we have a credit slide?
Yeah, we have a credit slide.
Well, we can put up that. I was more like there are people here doing jobs that you don't
Yeah.
see.
Maybe
Should
we
we
can
like
put it-
Can
the
we-
camera?
can we
Like
change the
rotate
camera,
the camera?
Can you activate it?
Oh, I'm not sure if you will do
Not
that.
run away, please.
Do not run
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Are you here?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Oh, okay, like Bram is just going to take down everything. This is like the real pro. Like there's Lydius, in case
Oh,
you have
look,
never
we have
seen him.
two-
Hi.
Our tech guy.
Yeah,
All right.
that's awesome. Yeah, so this is Shay and Paul and Marcel, Matthias, Pierre, Joachim, and Stefan.
Thank you, guys. All right. And then we have the slide, right? So-
Now we can do it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.